Hey guys, Serendi here. Here is part 4 of What If Bell Cranel Was Immortal. Hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 10, Grace 10. Old Habits Die Hard. Well, what do we have here? Jumping in fright, Bell spins around with sword and shield in hand as he looks around to find the source of the voice, all the while ignoring the pain racking his body. It didn't help that he still had a few arrows stuck in him, one in his right shoulder and the other in his gut. If it weren't for the fact that he was an undead, as well as the boon that was the Estus flask, he'd been long dead again by now. Is it not so that thou art new? Thou fared well to find me. After looking around frantically, he finally found the source of the voice coming from above and looked up. A cat. It was a cat. A cat about the size of those armored boars he ran into not too long ago. And it was talking. But cometh thee not for the grave of Sir Artorias? My advice true. Forget this. The legend of Artorias art none but a fabrication. Traversing the dark? 'Tis but a fairy tale. Have thine own respect. Go not yonder knocking for nothing, I say. The cat spoke, its voice like an elderly woman. She spoke as if knowing why Bell was here, though. Ha! Was how Bell responded, having no idea what the talking cat was talking about. He was still stunned at the fact that the cat was talking. Well now, thou art a strange one, the cat said, looking surprised. Have thee not come to pillage the grave of Sir Artorias? And no, I would never do anything like that, Bell exclaimed, still a bit jumpy as he had been trying to get away from some crazy people talking about how he was an intruder to this forest. I mean, sure, he may have taken some stuff off of dead corpses, but they were corpses. It's not like the dead can complain when they're, dead. He felt bad about doing it, but when almost everything in this land was trying to kill him, he couldn't afford to be picky if he wanted to survive and not wake up at a bonfire constantly. So you claim, yet thou art quite heavily equipped, the cat said, pointing out the sword and shield in the undead's possession as well as the mace and throwing knives hanging by his waist. I swear, I didn't come here with bad intentions, Bell said, pushing up the visor of his knight helmet and trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. Sheathing his sword and holding his hands up. He then said, I don't even know who this Artorias is. Bell didn't see it due to where he was, but what seemed like a flash of recognition appeared in the cat's eyes before it disappeared as fast as it came. Thou know not whom Sir Artorias is? No, I've never even heard of him, Bell said, speaking truthfully. The only mention of this Artorias he's heard of was from that crest he bought from Andre earlier. Besides that, he knew next to nothing about who this Artorias character was. Fu ha 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 ha. Suddenly, the cat bursts into laughter, further confusing the undead as to what was so amusing. Well indeed, thou art a strange one. Nevertheless, I feel some liking for thee. Say to me, what is thy name? Bell Cranel, ma'am. Bell politely introduced himself to the cat while still a bit confused. I'm Alvina of the Darkroot Wood. The cat finally introduced herself, smiling to herself as she looks down at the armored undead. I command a clan of hunters who track down defilers of the forest graves. Wait, you mean Bell puts 2 and 2 together, pointing outside into the forest. Yes, those were indeed mine hunters thou ran into, Alvina said, taking notice of the arrows poking out of Bell. Doth forgive him. They are a passionate group whom take their job seriously. Oh, it's fine, I guess, Bell said unsurely. He had experienced an earlier death when one of those hunters had shot an arrow through his head. It's the reason why he had the visor of his helmet down now despite barely being able to see through the slit. But if these hunters were just doing their job, then he could let bygones be bygones. It helped that he didn't lose his collection of souls in the process. So what dost thou say? Wilt thou not join us? Alvina said, asking Bell to suddenly join her covenant. Huh? Emmy? Bell pointed to himself, surprised by the sudden offer. Oh yes. Alvina smiles mischievously. I believe we would suit thee well. And so, after slaying the Taurus demon blocking his way, avoiding the Hellkite Wyvern, running away from Black Knights, and meeting Andre the Blacksmith, this was how Bell came to join his very first covenant. Thwack 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 thwack. The sound of a hammer slamming a nail into wood echoed inside the abandoned church that was the home of the Hestia Familia. Hestia had woken to this sound and, after cleaning herself up, found Bell up on the roof fixing any holes he could find. Apparently, he had been at this all night and was nearly done by now. If it wasn't for the fact that her child didn't require sleep, she would have berated the undead for ignoring rest. But because of the fact that Bell didn't need to sleep and rest, Hestia understood that being the only one awake at night could be quite boring if not maddening, so there was a need to keep oneself busy. For Bell, this either took on the form of wood-carving figurines, which were now displayed on a newly built bookshelf, and setting up defenses around the building, something Hestia thought wasn't needed but Bell insisted. She didn't know when Bell had gone and bought wood to fix the holes in the roof, but she tuned out the sounds of Bell working and focused her attention on her current guest, the supporter that's been working alongside Bell for the past couple of weeks now. Lilaruka Arde. That's your name, right? Hestia asked, narrowing her eyes on the Paolum girl sitting down on one of the few church seats that were still in good condition. Hestia herself was standing in front of the altar looking down on the said Paolum. Why yes, Lily responded a bit nervously, head lowered a little as to avoid the goddess glare. To say Hestia was upset with the girl would have been an understatement. She had heard what had happened a few days ago from Bell, and she was not pleased. To know that the Paolum in front of her had tried to lead her Bell into a trap greatly displeased the goddess. What displeased the goddess, even more, was hearing the fact that Bell had actually killed people. If it weren't for the stories Bell was telling her, she would have blamed the Paolum in front of her for forcing Bell's hand. Really, she was more bothered by the fact that Bell could so easily take a life without hesitating. Though, considering the stories of his experience he's been telling her for the past few days, she really shouldn't be that surprised that Bell was able to kill so easily. It was disheartening to know that that pure, innocent boy she had met in that alleyway that night months ago was possibly gone now. Sighing to herself, Hestia puts aside such thoughts in order to focus back on the topic at hand, what to do with the Paolum before her. I'll be honest with you, I don't like you. I don't want you near anywhere, my child, Hestia bluntly said, making no attempt to hide her dislike for the girl in front of her. After what Bell told me, I'm appalled that you still have the nerve to sponge off of him. Just what are your intentions, you thieving cat? Answer frankly, Hestia said, reminding the girl that despite appearances, she was still a goddess and would know if the Paolum was lying or not. Isn't self-interest still driving you? No, Lily said, taking a moment to gather her nerves back before addressing the goddess, who was only a foot taller than her, staring her down. It's true that Lily tried to lure Master Bell into a trap that put him and Miss Sif in danger. Lily still regrets going through with the act. By all rights, Master Bell had every right to punish Lily, but he didn't. His kindness touched Lily. That's why she won't do something as lowly as betrayal anymore. Humph. Hestia detected no lies in Lily's words, but that still didn't appease the goddess one bit. That's all pretty easy to say, but you've been looking depressed all this time. You say you'll change your ways, but aren't you just feeling troubled because Bell has been too kind to you? Lily flinches at the goddess's words, showing that there was truth to what Hestia had said. Listen here, if you ever try to attempt what you did last time again and endanger Bell, I will never forgive you. Lily swears. Lily grits her teeth, gathering up her resolve as she stands up to face the goddess. To Master Bell and to Lady Hestia, that she will never betray them, most of all Master Bell who he placed his trust in. Above all, Lily swears to herself. Hestia looks at the Paolum all over, detecting not a single lie from the small girl. Somewhat satisfied, Hestia relaxes a little, but still keeps a stern look on her face. Okay, if you're so willing, then allow me to judge you. You have no right to object. Take it like divine judgment look after Bell for me. Ha! Lily blinked, surprised at the sudden request. Bell is strong, as I'm sure you're well aware by now. He can take care of himself just fine, Hestia said, glancing upward to where Bell was still at, hammering away at any holes he could find. Booth wasn't always like this. I'm afraid his strength will start to attract some unwanted attention. The incident a few days ago just proves this. So I want you to keep an eye on him. Make sure he doesn't get involved in any unsavory sorts of trouble. Lady Hestia. Understand? I'm placing a lot of trust in you by telling you this. Reluctant as I may be, I don't have a lot of options, Hestia said, sighing as the Paolum in front of her was the only person Bell brought with him to the dungeon and out questing. Not counting Sif since she was a monster and all. Perhaps she should redouble her efforts in trying to find more people to recruit into her familia? If you still feel indebted, then do this for me. Prove with your actions that you really have changed. Lady Hestia, Lily appeared stunned at the goddess's request before she smiles brightly and nods. Understood. Lily will do her best to keep an eye on Master Bell, and make sure he doesn't get into any trouble. Good. Hestia nodded her head in satisfaction before offering the Paolum a handshake which she takes. You two seem to be getting along. The two females jump before turning to see Bell entering through the door of the church, carrying a toolbox in hand as Sif, who had been outside washing up, walked by his side as always. They didn't even hear him coming in, which was in a way amazing considering he was in full armor and all. Well, I guess you can say that, Hestia said, trying to appear as if she and Lily hadn't discussed the latter taking on the job of looking after the armored undead. Caw. Bell? Yes. Why is there a crow on your shoulder? Just as the goddess had said, there was indeed a crow standing on Bell's right shoulder, minding its own business as Bell made no attempt to get rid of it. I found it when I was fixing the holes in the roof, Bell said, pointing upward. There was a nest hidden in the corner. Raising an eyebrow, Hestia looks up and follows Bell's finger. It took a while, but Hestia was able to find the nest her child had been talking about, located in the corner of the roof and hidden quite well in the shadows. Okay, turning back to Bell and looking at the crow on his shoulder, Hestia grew noticeably anxious. Can you, get rid of it? Tilting his head to express his confusion. Bell nonetheless complied with his goddess and turns to the black-feathered bird who, in turn, turns to him. Reaching into one of his pouches, Bell takes out a magic stone the size of his thumb and gives it to the crow. Caw! Letting out a cry, the crow grabs the item with its beak and flies off to who knows where, leaving everyone but Bell to stare at the undead, confused by his actions. Master Bell, why did you give that bird a magic stone? Lily asked the undead, whose only response was to shrug his shoulders. Wish I had some rubbish on me, Bell mutters to himself, further confusing the two females while Sif just minds her own business as she heads downstairs to gather her and Bell's equipment for today. And so began another day for Bell Cranel and the Hestia Familia +1. Blue Pharmacy. In a calm manner, the god in charge of the shop scribbled down on the paper in front of him. Eyes scanning the numbers in front of him, he added and subtracted, taking days and other factors into account before totaling up the results. A frown appeared on Mayaka's face as he looked down at the numbers in front of him. No good, Naza, who had been standing right next to the god, asked with a worried expression. Mayaka's response was to sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration before saying a simple, "No. How bad is it?" It's not too bad, but, with the way things were going, they weren't going to be able to make the deadline, even with a week left. It'll be fine, Mayak reassured his only child, seeing the worried expression on the Chianthrope's face. We still have a week left. I'll think of something, don't worry. But, ring. Before Naza could say any more, the ringing of the doorbell alerted the two of a customer. Quickly rushing to put away the papers and writing utensils scattered all over the counter, Naza was the first to greet the customer while Mayak was busy stashing away the rest of his mess. Welcome, oh. Hello, Bell. Having gathered and readjusted the papers in his hands, Mayak pauses for a bit and turns to see that it was indeed the child of his friend, Hestia, standing by the door and decked out in that armor of his. Peeking behind him was that wolf that followed him, Sif if he remembered correctly, waiting patiently outside the store. The armored adventurer nodded at the two before walking up to the counter and handed over a bag to the Chianthrope. Blue papilio wings, as requested, Bell said, his voice the only thing that told Mayak and Naza who he really is, even with the said voice slightly echoing under his helmet. Looking inside the bag, Naza nodded as it was indeed the drop items of a blue papilio, a monster found on the 7th floor of the dungeon. I meant to deliver this yesterday, but I returned from the dungeon late last night and thought it better to come by morning, Bell said. That's fine. You did great. Better in fact. Naza praised the knight honestly as blue papilios were rare monsters and thus were very hard to encounter in the dungeon. Just wait a sec, I'll get your reward, Naza said as she tied the bag closed before heading to the back to grab Bell's reward. Now alone, Mayak turned to the child of his friend and spoke. Did Naza give you another quest? Mayak asked as he didn't remember issuing any quests to the guild, which could only mean that his child must have given the knight a quest behind his back. She called me to an alleyway and handed me the quest yesterday, Bell said. While suspicious, he was getting potions as a reward, so he saw no reason not to do it. That girl, Mayak sighed, shaking his head at the actions of his only blessed child. Seconds later, the Chianthrope herself returned with a wooden carrier carrying 12 potions in hand. Here you go, Naza said as she handed the knight his reward. I threw in a bit extra as a sign of thanks. Thank you, Bell said as he took the offered potions for himself, grabbing them and stashing them away in the many pouches that lined up wrapped around the knight's waist. Are you having trouble? Huh. Both god and child blinked in surprise at the knight's sudden question. In response, said knight gestured with his head over to the papers Mayak had yet to put away, displaying the massive amounts of scribbles and numbers on them. Oh, this. Mayak quickly grabbed the papers and tried to play it off. This is nothing, just a side project is all, yeah. Is that so? Whether the knight brought what the god had said or not was unclear due to the tone Bell spoke and the helmet hiding his face. Turning back to Naza, he then asked, Do you have any more quests you want to be done? I'm heading out of the city again, so if there's anything you want, I can get it for you if the chance comes by. Bell Mayak began as if he could hardly believe his ears. Eggs of a bloodsaurus. Naza spoke up, much to Mayaka's surprise. If you happen to find any of those, please bring them to us. Naza, do you realize what you're saying? Mayak exclaimed. Is something the matter? Bell asked, not knowing why the god was so distressed. Bell, please forget what Naza just said. Mayak said to the knight before turning back to the Chianthrope. Naza, how could you suggest such a thing? I'm not asking him to go to the deep floors, Naza said. I'm talking about the ones in the Cielo forest. It's still too dangerous for someone like Bell, Mayak argued. I know things seem desperate, but to send Hestia's child on such a quest is too risky. I could go with him for support, Naza suggested, but the gods still refused. Not happening, not with your condition, Mayak said in a stern tone which soon softened when he saw the Chianthrope's downcast look. Naza, please, I just don't want anyone getting hurt, most of all you. Understand? Yes? Naza muttered with a small blush on her face. Mayak smiled at this and turned back to Bell. I'm sorry you had to see they. However, when he turned, the knight was no longer standing there, much to the surprise of the god and Chianthrope as neither of them heard the armored adventurer leaving the store. Bell? Mayak looked around to see if the knight was just looking around. But still, there was no sign of the knight, for he had indeed taken his leave. Guild. A blood saurus? Yes. Bell nodded at his advisor. What can you tell me about them? Ina raised an eyebrow at the knight before telling him all she knew. Well, they're dinosaur-like monsters found on the 30th floor, near the deep floors of the dungeon. A dinosaur, the knight repeats to himself before he tilts his head, expressing his confusion. Is that a type of dragon? He guess, the half-elf said. Unsure. Technically, both species were both lizards, it's just the one had wings and could breathe fire while the other didn't have such things, at least to her knowledge. She wouldn't be surprised if there was a fire-breathing dinosaur somewhere down in the dungeon. Why are you asking about this? You're nowhere near strong enough to take on one, much less venture down deep enough to find them. I heard about them from someone and was simply curious, Bell said, his tone betraying no lies. By the way, do you know where the Cielo forest is located? The Cielo forest? Ina repeated in confusion at the change of topic before humming to herself. If I recall correctly, Cielo forest is located near the Alb Mountains east of Ororio. East, huh? Bell said, seemingly lost in thought. Ina wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but she thought there was a slight hint of fanger in the knight's tone when mentioning the east. Bell? Hearing his name snapped Bell out of whatever thoughts were brewing in his head. Sorry? The knight apologized before asking, are there any quests from that direction? As a matter of fact, Ina began as she dug into her drawer and pulled out a roll of paper which she soon handed to Bell, who unrolled it to look at its contents. We received this yesterday. A mother and her child are planning on returning to their village located in the east and requested the guild to have guards protect them on their journey. We usually request the Ganesha Familia for requests like these, however, most of their members seem to be preoccupied with something as of late, so I thought you'd be the next best thing. I see, Bell said as he read off the quest paper before nodding to himself and rolled it up. I'll take it. Good. The family is leaving around 11, so I suggest you make your preparations before leaving, Ina suggested. Nodding in agreement, Bell motioned for Sif, who had been keeping herself busy by glaring at passing by adventurers much to their discomfort, to follow him as the two left the building. Soon after, Ina's co-worker, Misha Flott, walked over to the half-elf while watching the strange pair leave. Should I be worried that I'm starting to get used to seeing that thing around here? Misha asked, referring to Sif. She has a name, you know, Ina said, frowning at the pinkette. Sorry, Misha apologized, throwing her hands up in surrender before looking back where Bell and Sif had left. Think he'll be all right? I heard him talking about blood sources and stuff. I'm sure he'll be fine, Ina said, a bit unsure but was still confident in Bell. While his talk of a blood source concerned her, with the way her charge has been acting for the past few weeks, she was sure the knight wouldn't go looking for trouble. Later. It sure was nice of that mother to give us these, Lily commented as held in her hands a basket of fruits and veggies. Yes, it was, Bell said, taking out a tomato from the basket and inspecting it. As a former farm boy, he could tell from a glance how ripe the red vegetable was. The girl looked a bit sad to leave, Lily commented again, referring to the daughter they had parted with not too long ago. I think she liked you, Master Bell. Maybe it was the armor. Sam, the one driving the cart they were in, and someone who Bell has gotten to know recently, added in his own comment with a laugh. That's probably it, Lily said, smiling a little. Bell himself didn't say anything as he put the tomato in his hand back in the basket before taking out an apple and giving it to Sif, who was resting her head on his lap as usual. So, Bell? Sam spoke up while keeping his eyes on the road. Where to next? Or is that all for today? I don't know about you, but I got a big day tomorrow, so I need to head back to Ororio to restock. I have business at the Cielo forest, Bell replied while feeding Sif her apple. Roger. With the crack of the reins, Sam directed the horses pulling the cart to take a right. The Cielo forest? Lily looked at the armored adventurer, wondering what business did Bell have there. It's a minor quest, Nothing to worry about, Bell assured the Palom as he fished out another apple and offered it to Sif, who finished it in 3 bites. The rest of the ride was quiet for the most part, as a few hours later, they had arrived at their destination. "This is the place," Sam said. "What now?" "Wait here. We won't be long," Bell told the merchant as the party all got off the cart and entered the forest. Almost immediately, their surroundings grew dark. The trees of the forest seemed to stretch several meters into the air, and the leaves were grouped together so much that they blocked out the skies, covering almost everything in total darkness, with only small beams of sunlight making its way through small gaps, making it somewhat bearable to navigate, but still difficult. Yet, even with the low visibility, Bell was not in the least bothered, far from it. His time and training as a forest hunter had kicked in, allowing Bell to navigate the dark forest almost perfectly. Just by walking, he could tell the ground was covered in vibrant colored wildflowers and dark moss. Really, the night would have been hard-pressed if he had chosen to come here at night. "Lily, are you still there?" Bell spoke up, making sure the Palom was still with him, or at least near. "Lily is here," the Palom responded as a hand grabbed Bell's arm. "Sif," a bark and something brushing the knight's boots told Bell that Sif was still with them, probably the only one besides Bell who could navigate through this forest without trouble. "It's so dark, Lily can hardly see anything," Lily commented as she stuck close to Bell as to not get separated, while also noticing that despite the darkness, Bell did not seem bothered one bit, something Lily chose to point out. "Master Bell seems to be doing fine. Can you see in the dark or something?" "Of course not," the knight replied. "He was an undead, not a vampire if such things existed." "Then how come you seem fine despite there being little lighting?" Lily asked. "I've had practice," Bell replied after a small moment of silence. "Practice?" The Palom raised an eyebrow at that, though it was hard to see due to the darkness. "I used to be a part of a covenant, a group called the Forest Hunters," Bell said, unknowingly getting Lily's full attention, as this was the first time the undead has ever talked about himself to someone other than Hestia. "As a forest hunter, I along with others were tasked with protecting graves hidden within a forest, known as the Darkroot Woods, from bandits and grave robbers alike. During the night, the forest grew really dark to the point that all I could see was black. However, over time and with training from my seniors, I was able to navigate such dark areas with some ease. You could say I'm used to places such as this." "Wow, that's neat," Lily said, finding Bell's history to be somewhat interesting. Confused by Bell's words, Lily followed Bell's gaze and looked down to see an indentation in the ground. It was a footprint, and a rather big one at that. Master Bell?" Lily spoke up, her tone nervous as the armored adventurer knelt down to inspect the footprint. "Just why exactly did you want to come here?" "I'm looking for a blood source." Lily took a moment to herself to process what Bell had said before she screamed, "A blood source? Specifically its eggs?" Bell added in, not in the least bothered by Lily screaming so close to him. "That doesn't make it any better," Lily exclaimed. "Why in the world are you looking for a blood source eggs? An acquiescence of mine asked me to find them. They mentioned that I could find them here in this forest," Bell explained before motioning Sif to come closer and gestured down to the footprint. "Can you track its scent?" Sif didn't answer right away as she lowered her nose to the footprint in the ground. After giving it a few sniffs, the wolf raised her head and sniffed the air. After a few seconds, she baked and gestured with her head towards a direction. "Lead the way," Bell said after giving his companion a pat on the head. "Now hold on a second," Lily exclaimed again, stopping the two from continuing on. "Master Bell, do you not know what a blood source is?" "I do not," Bell bluntly admitted. "They're monsters found on the 30th floor. Yes, my advisor told me about that earlier." "If you know, then why are you trying to look for one?" "I am trying to find its eggs," Bell specified. "That doesn't change the fact that you're messing with a monster found near the deep floors," Lily exclaims, almost out of breath from her constant near shouting. "But this is the surface, where monsters born up here are much weaker than those found in the dungeon," Bell pointed out. "I do not see what the problem is. I am just trying to obtain its eggs, not fight it." To survive in Lordran, Bell had to know when to pick his fights. Of course, as he progressed through his journey to link the flame, such choices were diminished, but nevertheless, the undead knew when to fight and when to run from a fight. Seeing that the knight was so adamant about this, Lily sighed before she gave up and followed the knight and wolf, with the latter leading the way. After about half an hour of walking, Bell told the group to stop and quickly hide behind some bushes. Lily quickly understood why, as up ahead were the very monsters they had been talking about. As the name suggested, blood sources were dinosaur-like monsters. Counting 3 of them, their blood-red skin matched their names as they all stood 5 meters tall and on 2 legs with 3 jagged toes with 2 stubby little arms with 2 clawed fingers for hands. Massive sharp teeth poked out of the monster's mouth, showing that the creatures were indeed carnivores. So those are blood sorrows, Bell muttered to himself, seeing all three monsters standing guard over a nest of eggs, counting about a dozen or so of them. They look like wingless dragons. The voice in Bell's head commented, which Bell, as usual, ignored but still agreed with as faint memories slowly returned to the undead, recalling seeing drawings similar to a bloodsaurus. Ah, so that's what a dinosaur is, Bell thought, vaguely remembering his grandfather, whose face he still couldn't remember, talking about such creatures to him when he was still a boy. There's more than one? Lily exclaimed quietly, looking fearfully at the blood-red monsters before turning to Bell and asked, "What do we do, Master Bell?" Bell doesn't reply back as he instead reaches into one of his pouches and takes out a bundle of cloth and unwraps it, causing a foul odor to seep out, causing Lily to gag and Sif to flinch a little as the former recognized the thing in the knight's hands. "Master Bell, is that?" In Bell's hands was what can only be described as a clump of meat, the same clump of meat the now deceased Canoe and his group used to attract monsters in their trap on Bell a few days back. Almost immediately, the bloodsorrows smelled the monster-attracting item and were drawn to it. Seeing this, Bell, while still making sure he was hidden, threw the lump of meat away where it landed quite a distance away from the group. Immediately, the blood-red monsters turned and followed after the monster-attracting item. Making sure they were a good distance away from them, Bell motioned the group to follow him as they all stealthily moved over to the next containing the eggs, all of which were the size of a full-grown cat. "Lily's never seen eggs as big as these," Lily commented, a bit amazed at the size of the eggs in front of them. Bell was slightly impressed as well but was more concerned about how much they could carry. However, before the knight could ask how many eggs could Lily fit in her bag, Bell felt Sif scratching his greaves in order to get his attention. Looking down to the wolf, she gestured with her head to look behind him, and he did, to find that the bloodsorrows were no longer distracted by the item and had set their angry eyes at them. "Ruah-ar! Wah!" Lily let out a cry of surprise before screaming when she saw all three bloodsorrows charging at them. "Master Bell, they're coming this way. What do we dash?" Whoosh! Lily didn't get to finish speaking as Bell had conjured up his flame and threw towards the charging monsters a great fireball which obliterated all three of them upon contact, reducing them to nothing but ashes. "Ha, I expected more from them, but they were only about as strong as orcs," the voice in Bell's head noted. Bell merely shrugged his shoulders, not caring if the monsters were strong or not. Anything that was a threat to him would be killed. If they were weaker than expected, then it was a good thing. "Master Bell, what have you done?" Lily practically screamed at the knight, who tilted his head in confusion, wondering what the Palum was so upset about. Seeing the knight's confusion, Lily pointed to some of the trees which had caught on fire due to Bell's fireball. Bell still didn't see what was wrong until he noticed that the flames were rapidly spreading. "Oops. Oops? That's all you have to say?" Lily exclaimed in both anger and panic. "Can't you, stop it or something?" "Of course not," Bell said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, much to the Palum's horror and disbelief. Pyromancy was the art of conjuring fire. Fire, by its very nature, was wild and free. No matter how strong a pyromancer can be, no one could truly ever tame fire. To try and do so was madness and would only incite misfortune and doom upon them. One only had to look at the fates that befell the Witch of Izalith and her children, the Witches of Chaos, to see what he meant. Pyromancy is the art of invoking and manipulating fire. But remember one thing, always fear the flame, lest you be devoured by it and lose yourself. I would hate to see that happen again. The words of his second pyromancer teacher rang in the head of the undead as he stared at the flames, rapidly spreading at an alarming rate. He had thought the trees around them were strong enough to tank his flames, but he had mistaken the area as the Darkroot Woods, where the trees were much larger, stood much taller, and were more sturdier than the ones of the Cielo Forest. "Hey, at least it's not so dark anymore," the voice in Bell's head pointed out, trying to find a silver lining to the situation, but said lining was very, very thin. "What do we do now?" Lily asked, coughing a little as smoke was starting to form around them. "Seriously, how strong were those flames?" "Grab as many eggs as you can," Bell said as he grabbed an armful of eggs from the next, while Sif grabbed as many as she could with her mouth. "Be careful not to crush them." "But what about the fire?" Lily exclaimed, pointing over at the beginnings of a forest fire. "Lily?" From under Bell's helmet, a glowing red eye could be seen through the slit as he stared hard at the Palum and said, "We were never here." Lily could only look at the knight in disbelief as he went and dumped the eggs in his arms into her bag before grabbing some more and repeating the process 2 more times. After grabbing what remained, the knight let out a "let's go," and the group was running through the forest, escaping the flames that would soon spread throughout the forest, killing whatever life that resided here. "I'm starting to see what Lady Hestia was so worried about," Lily thought to herself as she tried her best to keep up with the knight. She was starting to have second thoughts about agreeing to look after her employer. That day, as the sun began to set, Almost the entirety of the silo forest had been burned down. The fire would have continued to spread if it were for a sudden rainstorm appearing that night, putting out the flames. No one knew what had caused the fire, and for a certain group, they made sure it stayed that way. The next day morning, both Mayak and Naza could only blink and stare at what was in front of them. When they had both woken up this morning to start the day, they had not expected to see Bell waiting in front of the store with Sif by his side, as usual, and a dozen eggs with him. Eggs, mind you, that were the size of cats and told the two just what exactly these eggs were. Bell, you Mayak could barely form words as he looked at the armored adventurer in disbelief. Mayak, Miss Naza, good morning? Bell greeted the two before gesturing to the eggs sitting in the bag next to him and Sif. I have brought you your eggs. Are these really? Naza went over and grabbed an egg, inspecting it to make sure that these were indeed eggs of a bloodsaurus. As a potion maker with a good couple of years under her belt, the eggs were indeed the ones she had requested. Bell, how did you get these? Mayak asked as he picked up an egg to inspect it. He detected no lies form the night, but he still wanted to be sure. I got them from the silo forest, Bell answered, getting a surprised look from the two. You Naza looked at the knight in surprise again, realizing that he had been listening to what they had been saying yesterday. Bell, you didn't have to go out of your way to do this, Mayak said, thinking about what kind of danger the child of Hestia must have put himself through in order to obtain these eggs. You're right. I didn't have to do this, Bell said, surprising the god with his words before surprising him again as he said, I simply wanted to do this. Bell. Have a good day, you two, Bell said before motioning Sif to follow him. Come, Sif. We best not keep Lily waiting. The wolf let out a bark as she followed after her master, but not before giving Mayak and Naza a look that seemed to say, you best be grateful. Both god and child watched the knight and his wolf companion leave, their faces still in disbelief. Finally, Naza went and sighed. That guy's unbelievable. Yeah, Mayak agreed with his child but nonetheless smiled as he looked at the eggs Bell had left them with, not even waiting around to accept any reward from them. The person known as Bell Cranel had changed. Mayak used to know him as a shy and nervous, but kind boy who was still green to being an adventurer. Nowadays, he wore that strange armor and seemed to barely socialize with anyone. Yet, with this act alone, Mayak knew one thing. Bell Cranel may have changed, he didn't know what caused it, but at the center of everything, the man under all that steel was still Bell Cranel, a boy who wanted to help others. Why did you do it? Bell hummed to himself as he walked with Sif down the street leading to Babel Tower. What made you want to help those two? You could have just ignored their problems. It had nothing to do with you. That's right, he could have. He could have simply ignored whatever problems the Mayak Familia was going through. He could have minded his own business and went on with his day. After all, he stood there, eyes wide under his helmet in shock, horror, and disbelief at what he was seeing. There, lying upon the sand in armor that looked very similar to that of an onion, of all things, was his friend and fellow adventurer, Siegmeyer. And standing over the unmoving onion knight was another person in similar armor wielding a bastard sword, the daughter of his friend, Sieglind. Oh, it's you. The female knight notices him approaching before looking down at her dead father, her voice filled with sadness and grief. My father, all hollow now, has been subdued. He will cause no more trouble. It's finally over. But he could barely hear the woman's voice as he stared down at his dead friend, the friend he had saved on multiple occasions. He didn't know it at first as to why his friend had turned hollow. But in time, as the years dragged on, he would come to realize what had caused this. Oh, father, dear father. Over the sobs of a grieving daughter, Bell had come to realize. He did this. He did this because he kept saving his friend. Sometimes, good deeds don't always help people. Bell had come to learn this the hard way during his time as an undead. Even then, even still, old habits die hard, I guess. Sometimes, doing good doesn't always lead to happy endings, no matter what fairytale stories say. Sometimes, doing good could lead to an even worse ending. Yet, even knowing that, it was simply in his nature to help others. Meanwhile, with one swing of her blade, the monsters surrounding her all fell, dead. She swung her sword to get rid of the blood coating it before looking around to see all the dead monsters around her. She then looked at her hand, flexing it. I don't feel tired at all, Ace said to herself, flexing her fingers a few more times, having come down to the dungeon all alone in order to adjust herself to her new level. Even after killing all of the monsters here, she didn't feel the least bit winded. Of course, she was still in the middle floors and the monsters here were barely a threat to her. Perhaps she should travel down and fight stronger monsters just to be sure. She didn't want to assume things and then pay for it later. Come out, Ace suddenly said, raising her sword. I know you're there. At first, seemingly talking to herself, the air in front of Ace shifted until a figure appeared before the sword princess. garbed in a dark cloak that covered the entire body and thus hiding what gender the person was as well as facial features. "So I've been noticed." The figure in front of Ace spoke in a voice that seemed to shift between a male and a female's voice, further making it difficult as to what the figure's gender was. "I underestimated you. Do you have business with me?" "Indeed I do. However, before I state my purpose, I would kindly ask you to lower your sword. I mean you no harm." "Who are you?" Ace asked after lowering her sword. "Me? Just a washed-up mage. Perhaps you would understand if I told you I'm the one who spoke with Lilyun Louis." Exclamation point. Ace looked at the cloaked figure in surprise, realizing who this person was. "Ace Wallenstein, I would like to entrust you with a quest." Chapter 11. Grace 11. Getting involved. Fells, why did you issue the Sword Princess a quest? In a dark room with the only light coming from flaming torches, a single voice echoes throughout the room, speaking to the only other occupant here. Regarding that jewel, it seemed the Sword Princess showed quite a reaction to it. A figure spoke out, their entire form covered by a black cloak as their voice seemed to switch between a male and female's voice, making it hard to decipher what gender the cloaked person was. Before the cloaked person, sitting on a throne, was a man who was easily identified as a god due to the aura he gave off. Dressed in a black hooded cloak and sandals, the only thing that could be seen was the god's face, white hair, and blue eyes which stared down at the cloaked figure standing before him. "I suspect there may be some connection between it and Ace Wallenstein, so I made the call." The cloaked figure, Fells as the god had called the person, explained. "Also, while we contained the incident in the 30th floor pantry, Leto and our allies suffered heavy losses. They cannot shoulder any more duties at this time." The god remained silent for now, letting Fells continue his reasoning. "There were no guards before, but now our enemy is sure to be more cautious. When I saw the Sword Princess enter the dungeon, I could not let the opportunity pass. Guards that tamer may appear again, I shall inform Hermes myself." "My apologies, Aurenas," Fells apologized, identifying the god as the one who founded Orario itself. "There will be casualties once again," Aurenas said, already predicting future losses. "With secrecy being our utmost priority, we cannot interfere any further than this," Fells said. "However, we cannot allow this situation to continue unabated. Aurenas, let's put our trust in the unexpected variable called the Sword Princess and the chain reaction she will cause. Believe in what charmed the gods, those irregulars called humanity." Aurenas merely hummed, knowing that his companion's words were true and that all they could do now was sit and wait. "And what of the dungeon?" the founder of Orario asked his cloaked friend. "By your request, I have been investigating the dungeon for the abnormalities you sensed," Fells said. "However, I could not find anything out of the ordinary what with my limited abilities. So I sought the Queen for answers." "The Queen," Aurenas repeated, thinking about the one who was in charge of looking after them. Indeed, if there were any changes to the dungeon, she would be the first to notice. "What did she say?" "What the Queen told me has me concerned," Fells said, her tone filled with both confusion and worry. "She said that the dungeon was scared." "Scared?" Aurenas raised an eyebrow at that. The dungeon was called many things. To call it scared was an uncommon description of it, for the dungeon was anything but. As the one who overlooked the underground labyrinth and made sure the monsters below didn't reach the surface, to hear the dungeon was scared was both confusing yet equally concerning. "A more accurate word would be anxious, but that is what she said," Fells said. "It seems the dungeon, or rather, something within it, has been reacting to something. After a bit of investigating, I have traced the source to a possible suspect." "And? Who is this suspect?" "A rookie adventurer by the name of Bell Cranel. Dungeon, 16th floor. Ruhar." Letting out one final roar, a Minotaur fell to its knees, blood spraying out from its cut neck before it fell down, dead. Soon joining the bull-like monster were a pair of Lydrafangs and a small pack of hellhounds. "Amazing, Master Bell." Miss Sif, coming out from her hiding place, Lily expresses her amazement at the duo's prowess, evident by the number of monsters around them as packs of hellhounds, Lydrafangs, and Minotaurs laid dead by Bell and Sif's feet. Sif breathed through her nose as she brandished the claymore in her mouth, throwing off most of the blood on it. Meanwhile, Bell was simply standing still as he looked down at his sword, deep in thought. "Lily already knew you were strong, but to take down multiple Minotaurs so easily along with packs of hellhounds and Lydrafangs, Lily can't help but wonder what Master Bell's true level is," Lily said, dissecting magic stones from the slain monsters around them, only having difficulty with the higher-leveled monsters. Thankfully, Sif was there to assist, using her claws to tear open the flesh for the Palum. The fact Sif went and aided the Palum in the first place showed that Sif was slowly getting used to her presence. Bell didn't respond back, still looking down at his sword. Now, while it was normal for Bell to be quite silent in the dungeon, The way he was looking at his sword caught Lily and Sif's attention. Master Bell. This is bad. Bell's muttered to himself. This sword is at its limit. Indeed, true to Bell's words, the sword he bought long ago was nearing its limit. Despite constant upkeep, scratches can be seen all over the steel blade with nicks and chips decorating both sides of the double-edged weapon, dulling what was once a sharp sword. One sword, they say, can cut just 5 enemies before growing blunt with blood and fat. A well-made sword can do even more than that before dulling. In his travels through Lordran, Bell had found and collected a plethora of weapons with most of them outshining the blade in his hands. But by no means was it mediocre. It held up just fine, but due to how rapid Bell was progressing through the dungeon, it deteriorated faster than most weapons Bell was used to. In short, the sword could not keep up with Bell's strength. If only I had a catalyst with me, I could cast a quick repair, Bell thought to himself, sheathing his sword before pulling out the hand axe he brought with him as an extra weapon to use. How long it would last was another matter entirely. You know, with the amount of time we have, you'd think we would have brought a catalyst by now. The voice in his head spoke up, pointing out Bell's misuse of his time. Semi-ignoring the voice in his head, Bell made a mental note to later ask Ina where he could buy catalysts from. He had nothing against his pyromancy, far from it, but keeping his skill set varied was what allowed Bell to survive as long as he did even as an undead. Let us continue, Bell said, testing the weight of the hand axe in his hand before moving forward. All right. Lily stood back up after extracting the last of the magic stones with Sif's assistance before following after the armored adventurer. As the group walked, Bell sent a glance towards Sif, silently asking the wolf if her weapon was okay. Said wolf sent a look back, informing the knight that the sword in her mouth was doing just fine. While pleased, Bell couldn't help but wonder just where exactly had Sif picked up the claymore from. It held up surprisingly well after all this time. You know, Lily spoke up while also keeping an eye on their surroundings. Lily was a bit hesitant at first going this deep into the middle floors, but if we keep up this pace, we might just reach the under resort. The under resort? From under his helmet, Bell raised an eyebrow in confusion. You don't know it? Lily asked the knight, who responded by shaking his head. The under resort is located on the 18th floor, one of the few safety points in the dungeon where no monsters are born. It's also where the city of Rivera is located at. Rivera. Bell tilts his head, expressing his confusion as Sif mimics the act to express her own confusion. It's a city that was built and is run by adventurers, Lily explained. Lily's never been there herself, but she heard that you can trade and buy items over there, though they're quite expensive or so Lily's heard, so she doesn't recommend it unless you really have to. I see, Bell said, thinking to himself. Lily would like to see it herself, though we'd have to pass by the 17th floor to get there. What's wrong with the 17th floor? Bell asked, noticing the Palam's hesitation. The 17th floor is where the Monster Rex, Goliath, is located at. Monster Rex. Bell repeated the name, confused at first until he remembers. A Monster Rex. The one who spoke up was Rivera, taking the lead in explaining to the armored adventurer what a Monster Rex is an especially powerful monster that only appears on certain floors. Unlike common monsters, it takes a Monster Rex much longer to respawn due to how powerful one is, with timing being different depending on how powerful a Monster Rex is. We tend to call them floor bosses because of this. So Bell looks down at the ground, thinking about what laid below it. Down below this floor, there's a Monster Rex. Then again, Lily heard that the Goliath had recently been taken care of. So it shouldn't have respawned already? Lily said, taking a moment to think whether it was a good idea to continue forward or stay and continue to farm for more magic stones. While Lily was thinking about their next course of action, Bell too was thinking about whether they should continue down or play it safe and stay where they were at. However, while Lily was more hesitant to go further, Bell was the opposite. Chester has my stuff, and my only clue is that he might be hiding down here in the dungeon. Bell thought to himself, thinking about the masked trickster. If we're to find Chester, we'll need to keep exploring down until we find him. The voice in the undead's head said. Besides, we'd never have made it as far as we have in Lordran if we played it safe all the time. That's true, Bell thought, agreeing with the voice in his head. It's true that while he liked to play things safe, he had never made it as far as he did in Lordran if he always shied away from danger. It's like when he was face to face with fog gates. Unless he ventured through one, he would never know what was on the other side. Let's keep going, Bell said. Are you sure? Lily asked, still somewhat hesitant. Yeah, Bell nodded. Plus, you said it yourself that the Monster Rex won't respawn anytime soon. So now's a perfect time as any to venture further down. While Bell had been curious to see what a Monster Rex was like, with the way his equipment was in terms of weaponry, it was best to not take risks and use this chance to get further down into the dungeon. And who knows, he might find clues about Chester's whereabouts at this so-called under resort. Okay, Lily would have liked if we had more party members, But there's not much we can do about that right now, Lily said. Remembering how Bell was the only member of his familia, she wasn't sure if Sif counted. And what about you? Bell asked his wolf companion to see what her opinion was. The wolf grumbled, thinking about whether she wanted to head deeper into the dungeon. After a moment of thinking, she looked up at Bell and nodded her head. Well then, let's go. And with that, the group proceeded towards the entrance that would take them to the 17th floor. The trek to the next floor was quiet and uneventful. It never ceases to amaze Lily by how strong your magic is, Master Bell, Lily commented as she just witnessed the knight reduce the monster party to a pile of ashes in seconds. So this was the strength of a high-class adventurer. Bell simply shrugs his shoulders, dispelling the flames in his left hand while yanking out his hand axe from the head of what used to be a Minotaur. If the Palum thought the spells he's used so far were amazing, then wait until she sees his more advanced spells. You know, Lily's been meaning to ask. How does Master Bell cast his spells without having to chant? Chant. Bell tilts his head in its usual confused manner. All forms of magic need a chant in order for them to activate, like Lily's Cinderella spell, Lily explained, pointing to the wolf ears and tail on her as an example. Even if no chant is required, a spell still needs to at least be spoken out loud for it to take effect. Yet Lily's never seen you utter a single word whenever you cast your spells. So how do you do it, if you don't mind Lily asking? Chanting sounds like a hassle, the voice in Bell's head commented after hearing Lily's explanation. As usual, Bell ignored it, even if he did agree with it, before answering the Palum. I don't know what to say. I've always been able to cast my pyromancy like this. Pyromancy? Lily repeated, confusion evident on her face. Eventually, the group found the entrance to the 17th floor and continued downward while Bell explained to the Palum what pyromancy is. Pyromancy, as the name suggests, has to do with casting fire and fire-related spells. From where I learned it, pyromancy was considered simplistic, almost primitive, but that doesn't make it any less dangerous. Anyone can learn pyromancy provided they have some attunement for it. Of course, in order for one to cast pyromancy, one first needs a pyromancy flame. A pyromancy flame? Lily repeated, confused. Sif was too if her expression was anything to go by. It's a type of catalyst any pyromancer worth his salt needs. Without it, one wouldn't even be able to cast a simple fireball, Bell explained before summoning a small flame to his left hand as a demonstration. An interesting thing about pyromancy is that it doesn't scale with one's stats. Huh? It doesn't? Lily asked, looking surprised. No. The damage of pyromancies is determined by the spell and the power of one's pyromancy flame, Bell explained. So, the reason why your spells are so powerful is because of... I practiced a lot, Bell said as he looked down at the flame in his left hand as his mind wanders to days long gone. He stood there, staring at the flame in his hands in childlike wonderment. As a boy, he has already dreamed about casting magic from his hands, and now, thanks to the man in front of him, he could do just that. There. Now you're a fully fledged pyromancer, the pyromancer of the Great Swamp said, chuckling at the smile Bell was sporting on his face. I see someone's excited. Now then, let's say we get started right now. Yes, he smiled and nodded, excited for what he was about to learn from his now fellow pyromancer. A wistful smile forms on Bell's face, hidden only by his helmet as he clenched his hand into a fist, extinguishing the flame before looking up. So that's the so-called Great Wall of Sorrow, Lily said as she and the group looked around the area they were in. Unlike the drab stone walls which had been present all the way from the 13th floor, the 17th floor was a single large room about 200 meters long from the entrance to the exit. It was also 100 meters wide and 20 meters tall. All in all, it was the perfect area to fight a boss monster such as a Monster Rex. The walls and ceiling were covered in many layers of jagged rocks aside from the one to the left entrance, which was completely smooth to the point it looked unnatural. This place just screams boss room. All that's missing now is a fog gate. Bell again chose to ignore the voice in his head in favor of asking about what Lily had just said. Great Wall of Sorrow? It's something adventurers from long ago called it, Lily explained, pointing over to the smooth wall. The Monster Rex sleeps just behind those walls, waiting to be reborn, and once it does come out, it brings despair to those who ventured here unprepared. Basically, the wall represents what separates high-class adventurers from the low-class ones. Is that so? Bell said as he looks up at the unnaturally smooth wall. This is Lily's first time seeing it, Lily said, sweating a little as she stared up at the infamous wall. Lily feels exceptionally smaller than she is right now. True, the smooth wall had an intimidating factor to it, but Bell had seen stranger. If anything, this Great Wall of Sorrow reminded him of a... Bam! Master Bell, what are you doing? Lily cried out when Bell suddenly walked up to the wall and punched it. So it's not an illusory wall, Bell mutters to himself, looking at his fist before up at the wall he just punched. He half expected to find hidden messages around here, hopefully none of them relating to or talking about an amazing chest. Again, what are you doing? Lily exclaims as she pulls Bell away from the wall. You can't just go punching this thing. What if the Goliath respawns early or something? You said it wouldn't for a while. It could happen. While it was true that the Goliath wouldn't respawn anytime soon, they were still in the dungeon where anything could happen. Sorry, habit, Bell apologized. What kind of habit makes you hit walls? Lily couldn't help but ask. The same one that has him kicking doors, but Bell chose not to voice that as he instead focuses on getting over to the exit of this floor. Something Lily was happier to do as she was the most anxious out of the group with Bell and Sif being completely fine. And with nothing standing in the group's way, it was a simple walk over to the stairs that would lead them to the 18th floor. Let's see what this under-resort is like, Bell thought to himself as he and the group went down, eventually reaching the entrance to the first safety point of the dungeon. Right, that was the first thing that came to Bell's mind when the group left the stairway. The usual floors of the dungeon were never pitch black thanks to tiny glowing crystals embedded in the walls, thus illuminating the place no matter what time of day it was. It was like leaving a night light on during the night. But the second Bell stepped out, it was like he had returned to the surface with the sun high in the sky. Of course, said sun and sky were actually giant crystals mimicking it, as a white crystal in the center acted as the sun while blue crystals surrounding it acted like the sky. Not only that, but from what he could see, crystals of varying sizes decorated the entire floor, with some being smaller than his feet to being as tall as he was and larger. A massive tree was located where Bell guessed to be the center of this floor, as it was surrounded by large forests and lakes. And over to the far east was what Bell guessed to be the city of Rivera Lily had told him about. So this is the under-resort, Lily muttered in amazement. It certainly is breathtaking, Bell said. He too was amazed to an extent, as it felt like they had stepped right into an elven forest. The only one not impressed was Sif, who had passed by this floor long ago in her quest to reach the surface. Lily's heard that some nobles outside of Orario would hire high-class adventurers to take them here just for the view, Lily informed. Really? Bell asked, and the disguised Palum nodded. That saw wasteful use of money. In Bell's mind, if they wanted to see this place so badly, why not do it themselves? Lily let out a weak laugh at what Bell said, though she too shared his thoughts. So what now? I'm heading over to Rivera, Bell said, turning to leave with Sif following close behind. There's a certain something I'm looking for, and so I'll need information from the people there. Ah, Master Bell, wait for Lily, Lily cried out as she quickly followed after the two. Rivera. Chester? Who's that? By the way, wanna buy some weapons? So said an arms dealer. Marvelous, who? The hell's that? Forget it, wanna buy some items? So said a woman selling a plethora of random items. A suited man in a top hat and a mask? I'm afraid I've never seen such a person. The bartender they were talking to laid down a small canteen filled with wine in front of Bell. That'll be 300 valis. Bell remained silent as he gave the man the money before taking the canteen and stashing it away. And Master Bell needs that why? Lily asked, giving the knight a questioning look. Just in case. In case of what? Bell didn't answer as he instead looked around the bar they were in, seeing sulking adventurers filling every table here. The one thing the knight saw that these adventurers had in common was that they were either severely injured or missing limbs. What the heck happened here? Lily couldn't help but ask, noting that some of the adventurers looked to be on the verge of crying. In fact, there was one such man who didn't have either of his legs, much to Lily's surprise and horror. You haven't heard? The bartender spoke up whilst wiping a glass cup clean. Apparently, the main route of the 24th floor is overrun with monsters. No one knows where they came from or where they're headed. Adventurers have already fallen victim. These guys are survivors who managed to escape. I see, Bell said, his tone dispassionate as he scanned the room. Had he been his old self, he probably would have felt something seeing all this. Now, he barely felt anything in front of this depressing sight. Those that were simply injured would recover from this eventually. But those missing limbs, well, sad to say, but their time as adventurers was over and done. Master Bell, can we leave now? Lily asked the knight, starting to feel uncomfortable here. Nodding, the two exited the bar where Sif was waiting for them. Once outside, the disguised Palum let out a breath of relief. Geez, that was heavy, Lily commented before turning to the armored adventurer. So now what do we do? We keep asking around, Bell said as he and Sif started walking with Lily quickly joining them. Are you planning on asking every person in town? Lily asked as she felt that was something her employer/friend would do. If I have to, the knight said, confirming the Palum's thoughts. You haven't told Lily just who this Chester person is, Lily said, curious as to who this marvelous Chester person was that Bell was trying to find. Someone who is currently in possession of my stuff. Your stuff. Before I came to Ororio, I collected a plethora of equipment. Swords, shields, catalysts, accessories, armor sets, and a few things best kept out of greedy hands. Lily felt herself shiver when the knight emphasized the word greedy. He probably didn't mean it, but she couldn't help but feel like the word had been directed at her. Did this Chester person steal from you? In a sense. He's the last person I want to have my stuff with, Bell said. There were a few things in his bottomless box that he wanted to be kept locked away. And if you happen to find this Chester person? Lily asked, nervous about the answer. Bell doesn't answer, which only made the Palum more nervous. She opened her mouth to speak again but decided that it was best to stop the questions here. Bell seemed to appreciate this as the tense atmosphere that had been developing faded away as Bell approached a raven-haired elf, raising his hand to get the elf's attention. Excuse em. Bam! It all happened so fast. 1 second the elf that Bell had been trying to talk to suddenly drew a short sword and swung at the knight. The next second, the said elf was now on the ground, having been slammed down by Bell, who parried the attack, knocking the sword out of the elf's hands, grabbed said elf by her neck, drew one of his throwing knives out and was now pointing it down in front of the elf's face, ready to take one of the elf's eyes if she tried anything funny. This all happened in the time it took for Lily to blink. Blinking a few more times, the Palum finally registered what had just happened. Master Bell, Lily exclaimed out loud as Sif began growling at the elf that had tried to attack her master. And now, Miss Sif, calm down. Master Bell is fine, see? Miss Filvis. Suddenly, a voice called out as a familiar to Bell. Looking blonde elf ran up to them, pointing at the knight. You! Let her go, you scoundrel! Ha! Bell lifted his head to the new elf, taking a second to recognize the elf as the one who happened to see with Ace when he visited the Loki Familia. Eh? Lafia Voridis blinked as she slowly recognized the knight herself. Wait, your tin head! Everyone but Bell and Sif jumped at the volume of a second voice speaking. Turning his head, Bell saw none other than Bet Loga stomping over to them, glaring at the armored adventurer. Yuri Bet, correct? The knight asked, taking a second to recognize the werewolf. You damn right I am, the werewolf shouted angrily. The hell are you doing here? I was just walking around gathering information, the knight said before using his knife to point down at the elf he was holding down, which made the said elf look warily at the motioning knife. I went to speak to this elf when she suddenly attacked me. So in response, I merely defended myself. She attacked you? Lafia asked, looking confused until winced, seemingly having remembered something. Did you try to touch her? I was going to pat her shoulder to get her attention. Yes, Bell said, confirming Lafia's thoughts, who mentally sighed. Master Bell, enough of that. Get off of her, you're making a scene, Lily said as indeed a crowd was starting to form around them. Seeing this, Bell finally moved the knife away from the black-haired elf, Filvis if Bell heard correctly, sheathing it before releasing the elf from his grasp and stood up. The knight offered the elf a hand, but Filvis ignored it as she grabbed her short sword, which had been knocked out of her hands when she lashed out earlier, and picked herself up, moving away from Bell whilst glaring at him. The knight ignored this as he faced the 2 Loki members in front of him. If you don't mind, I would like to ask some questions, the armored adventurer asked, acting as if what had just happened earlier had never occurred. And what the hell do you want? Bet said, acting rude as usual. We're in a hurry, so move it. It won't take long, I promise. I simply wish to know if your familia has had any progress in locating Chester, the knight politely asked. While it wasn't that long ago that he had visited the Twilight Manor, there was a slim chance the Loki familia may have learned something new. As an undead who's overcome impossible odds and challenges, a slim chance was better than none, so he asked anyway. Hell if I know, Bet rudely replied. Go ask the captain or something. I don't care. Now move it. With a shout, the werewolf rudely pushed Bell to the side. Hey! Lily spoke up, appalled by the werewolf's behavior, but Bet simply ignored her as he continued, one or at least tried to. Chomp! Yow! Bet cried out in pain when Sif went and bit the werewolf's tail. Miss Sif? Lily cried out in surprise, wondering just when had the wolf moved away from her. Bet gritted out a curse as he shook the wolf off of him, holding his behind as he glared at the wolf, who glared back, both baring their teeth. Fucking mutt! You wanna go? Sif growled in response as if saying, bring it. Sif, stand down. Bell spoke up, getting in the way of both wolves as he motioned Sif to calm down. Sif herself sent a look at Bell, who returned it through the slit in his helmet. With reluctance, the wolf did as told and calmed down, but still openly glared at the werewolf, who returned it. Bell himself, meanwhile, turned to Bet and apologized. Please forgive Sif. She's very protective of me. Bet turned his glare over at Bell, but the knight remained unaffected. Small cracks can be heard as Bet flexed his fingers, looking ready to start a fight until Lafia spoke up. Bet! Lafia cried out, sending the werewolf a silent look which reminded him of why exactly they were here. TCH. Clicking his tongue, Bet relaxed his stance and stuffed his hands into his pocket, stomping away. Bet! Lafia cried out to the werewolf again before sighing and quickly bowing to the knight in apology. I'm very sorry about him. It's okay, Bell said, waving off the elf's concern. Sif was the one who attacked your friend. I should be the one apologizing. He's not really my friend, Lafia muttered to herself quietly. You seem to be in a hurry, Bell said, having noticed the look Lafia gave to Bet earlier. Is something the matter? We're just looking for a comrade of ours, Lafia said before asking. By any chance, have either of you happened to have seen Miss Ace pass by here? The Sword Princess? Lily spoke up. The very same, Lafia nodded. She tends to come down to the dungeon by herself sometimes, so Bet and I are here to bring her back to our goddess. I see, Bell said before shaking his head to the elf's question. I'm sorry, but Lily and I just arrived in this town today. If Miss Ace were here, she's probably long gone from here. I see, Lafia said, frowning a little. Oi, what's the holdup? Bet's voice called over to the elf as the werewolf and the elf called Filvis were already ahead of her. Ah, coming, Lafia cried back, quickly bowing to the knight again before running off to rejoin her party. Bet and Filvis both glared at the knight, the former out of hate while the latter was one more of suspicion before the three soon took their leaves. Lily let out a sigh of relief. Lily never expected to run into Vannergand, and 1,000 elves here, especially with the Banshee. Banshee? Bell raised an eyebrow under his helmet as he looked at the Paolum. The raven-haired elf that was with them, Lily said, talking about Filvis. That was Filvis Chalia, Dionysus Familia's captain. I see, Bell said, looking back in the direction where the trio had left towards. Is Banshee her alias? Alias or titles are a second name given to adventurers once they reach level 2. A meeting of gods and goddesses, called the Donatus, is held once every 3 months where gods come together to discuss recent news and to hand out alias to rising adventurers. An adventurer's alias might even change as they level up again. For many adventurers, an alias, to put it simply, are cool titles and are thus one of many things adventurers are excited to get once they level up. I wonder what kind of alias would the gods give us if Hestia announced our current level? The voice in Bell's head spoke. As always, Bell ignored him, though he'd be lying if he said he wasn't at least interested in what sort of title he could have. One thing's for sure, he did not want to be known as Bell the Chosen Undead. He had no love for the title, and to know that the name was literally on his back displeased him greatly. No, it's more of nickname actually, Lily said, looking left and right before explaining. Apparently, everyone that's been in a party with that elf has all ended up dead. Really? Bell asked and Lily nodded. Whether the trouble came from within or without, she's the only one who survives. Lily's heard that she's a survivor of the 27th floor nightmare. Nightmare? Lily's not surprised that you haven't heard of it. It happened 6 years ago when Evelys was still around. Evelys? Bell tilted his head, letting Lily know that he was confused. Master Bell, you don't know about Evelys? Lily asked, surprised. When the knight shook his head, the Paolum was even more surprised. Lily is surprised. She didn't think there was anyone in Orario who doesn't know about Evelys. Just what is Evelys? Bell asked again. It's not really a what, but a who, Lily said before explaining. Evelys was a radical group led by gods who craved chaos and threatened Orario after the Zeus and Hera Familia weakened in power and were subsequently exiled from the city. It was weakened by the efforts of the guild along with various familia, such as the Loki Familia, until it was finally defeated years later. So a bad familia, Bell said, summarizing everything he had been told. Basically, Lily said with a shrug before continuing. Their notoriety is still well known to this day, and out of all of their atrocities, the 27th floor nightmare was the most horrific. What happened? Bell asked, curious. False information was leaked to the guild about strange activities happening down in the dungeon. Adventurers were sent to investigate only to be led into a trap as Evelys members sacrificed themselves to lure massive packs of monsters to them. It was a massacre. While Lily had been young when this incident occurred, just hearing the story about it was enough to send shivers down the Paolum's spine. So Miss Filvis is a survivor of that incident? Bell asked, which Lily nodded in response. According to other adventurers, she came back to town looking already dead, walking around as if trying to look for her dead allies. After that, any party she joined got wiped out at some point. It was like she was cursed. One party took a wrong turn in the dungeon, another fell victim to a gimmick, and another had a falling out. No matter what, she's always the lone survivor. Rumors about how she's bad luck spread, and Lily's heard that even her own familia avoid her like the plague. Thus people began calling her the solo, party-killing fairy, Banshee. Bell had no words to speak. Being left behind and abandoned. The elf known as Filvis Chalia experienced it in the worst possible way. And for it to happen multiple times, Bell did not believe in such nonsense, preferring to see things with his own eyes. But he couldn't help but pity the elf and relate to her to an extent. "It's probably best that we don't get involved with such a person," Lily said, adjusting her backpack before taking out a watch to check the time. "So what should we do now? Keep asking around about this Chester person or head back up?" "Master Bell." Lily looked at the knight in confusion as Bell had gone silent. Something's not right, Bell thought to himself. The elf earlier, Lafia, had said she and Bet were looking for their friend, Ace. If it was just the two of them, he would have paid it no mind. But after being told about Filva's status, the fact that the Loki members were with such a person just to look for their friend caught Bell's eye. "Lily." "Why yes." Lily jumped when Bell suddenly spoke up. "You still have those weapons with you, right? The ones from Iklos Familia?" Lily left them back at her safe house, she said, wondering why was the knight asking about them now. "I'm going to need them for a bit." "Huh." "Asfi, take a look at this." A black hair, brown-eyed, and light brown-eared Chianthrope by the name of Lulyun Louis called out to her leader, having found something. Down on the 24th floor, a party consisting mostly of Hermes Familia members stopped walking as Lulyun showed them what she had found. "What in the?" Asfi Alandromeda, alias Perseus, captain of the Hermes Familia, and one of Arario's most famous item makers, let out a gasp of surprise as before her and her party was a wall made entirely out of plants. "A wall? It looks to be made up of plants. This thing doesn't show up anywhere on the map," Lulyun said, holding the said map in her hands. The party had followed the path north, making no wrong turns. And yet here was this mysterious wall that seemingly reached up as high as the floor ceiling. Eyeing the wall blocking their path, Asfi turned to the only person who wasn't a part of her familia. "Sword Princess, have you seen anything like this in the deep floors?" "This is my first time seeing this as well," Ace said, having never seen such a thing before either. Raising her right hand up to the wall, Ace was surprised to feel what felt like a heartbeat from the plants that made up the wall. "It's alive," Ace thought as an ominous feeling overcame not just her, but to the entire party behind her. They could tell that whatever lied behind this wall was bad news. "Lulyun, are you sure this is the correct path?" Asfi asked the Chianthrope, checking to see if they had mistakenly taken a wrong turn somewhere. "Why yes, I picked a path with a straight shot to the pantry," Lulyun said, double-checking the map in her hands before looking back up at the wall blocking the way. "This thing shouldn't exist." Humming to herself again, Asfi quickly made a decision. "Falger, Thane, take the others and split into two groups. Look into the other paths, but don't go too deep in. Report back the instant anything seems amiss." Falger, a were-tiger, and Thane, an elf, both nodded at their orders. "Then I'll—" "Hold it right there." Ace was interrupted by one of the Palom twins. Pak was his name. "I know you're strong, but would you stop trying to show us up? We've got our own way of doing things. Got that?" Oi, you don't need to be so harsh," Lulyun said. "She's right, Pak. You shouldn't talk like that." The other Palom twin and older sister, Pot, said before turning to Ace. "You've been so nice to spearhead the group for us, so you should get some rest. Even if it's only a little. Plus, we wouldn't want to argue later over who gets all the loot. Right? You guys just shut up already. Hee hee." "Hey, let's go," Falger called out as the group split up. Ace didn't say anything as she drew her sword out and damaged the walls next to her. It was a common trick all adventurers knew. Monsters are born from the dungeon's walls. This was common knowledge. If a wall is damaged, it will regenerate in time. However, monsters will not be born while the walls are regenerating. By exploiting this, does this allow adventurers small breaks inside the dungeon. Hey, don't let them get to you," Lulyun said, thinking that the blonde swordswoman must have been hurt by the twins' attitude. "We're terribly sorry. Nelly," a human in charge of the rear guard, apologized before taking out a stamina potion and offering it to the Sword Princess. "Would you like a potion?" Ace shook her head, having no need for the potion. Ever since leveling up, Ace made sure to see how much her body's changed. After dealing with the monsters that were crowding the main route of the 24th floor, Ace was able to see that not only were her strength, speed, and defenses increased, but also her senses and stamina. Suffice to say, she was quite pleased with the results. "So that's what it is," Asfi said, suddenly speaking, which got the attention of the others. "Asfi? Such a huge gathering of monsters. I don't think this is the dungeon suddenly spawning many monsters at once." What do you mean?" Lulyun nervously asked. "Hungry monsters will gather at pantries from all over the floor, but if the entrance to said pantry was blocked, what do you think that horde would do next?" "Head for a different pantry," Ace said. realizing what Asfi had figured out. That's right. What's been going on for the last few days isn't a mass outbreak of monsters, but rather, a migration of monsters. The monsters unable to enter the North Pantry were forced to travel to the remaining two, leading them directly to the route main used by adventurers. This is the most logical explanation. While only a theory, I believe our investigation into the surrounding area will confirm my suspicions. And just a few minutes after she said that did the other members of the party return and told Asfi of their findings. So all the other entrances are indeed blocked, Asfi said, her suspicions confirmed. But Asfi, Lilyun spoke up, looking up at the wall before them. If your explanation is right, then what's on the other side of this thing? Just as Asfi had theorized, because the way to the North Pantry had been blocked, mass hordes of monsters were forced to migrate, which led to them taking the main route adventurers took, causing small casualties. However, like Lilyun had pointed out, if the pantry had been blocked, the question remained just what lied beyond the ominous wall. Such a question caused some of the parties to start sweating in anxiety. We'll find out when we go inside, Asfi said, adjusting her glasses before pointing over to what looked like a sealed entrance. That thing over there looks like a door, but it doesn't seem it'll open for us. Shall I cut it? Ace asked with a small glint in her eyes. You're really all brawn, aren't you, Sword Princess? Asfi couldn't help but comment. Why not have Meryl do it? Pak suggested, which Asfi agreed to. Very well. I would like to see how it holds up against fire, Asfi said before turning to another Palom much like the twins, but was dressed in a witch hat and robes. Meryl, magic please. Should I make it a big one? Yes, with a long chant. The Palom nodded before getting off of her friend, Dodone, and soon began chanting a spell. Seeing a fire spell being cast, Ace couldn't help but think to herself. I wonder what he's doing right now? And Ace meant one Bell Cranel. Just seeing the fire spell being cast brought to mind the strange armored adventurer and thinking back to his equally strange magic. What was the knight currently doing? Was he crawling through the dungeon much like she was right now? Or perhaps he was doing something else unrelated to the dungeon. Why am I even thinking about him? Ace thought to herself. The only thing that connected them was the knight's gauntlet which she had returned days ago. So why had she thought of the knight the second she saw fire? Was it his strange magic? Or perhaps Meryl has the development ability Mage. Ace was brought out of her thoughts by Pak suddenly speaking up, making small talk as they all waited for the Palom to finish her spell. Don't see that every day, do you? A Palom who's an upper-class magic user. She's guaranteed to have a bright future. Talented, unlike us. I'm sure you figured it out by now. Pot and I are the only LV2s in the vanguard. Ace awkwardly responded, not knowing what to say. You're an open book, trying to be all careful and stuff around us for no good reason, Pak said cynically. But from now on, if you're gonna stick close to anyone, switch to Meryl. Unlike us, she's a precious Palom that can't be replaced. Though she ain't as impressive as that captain of yours. You know, Finn? There isn't a Palom who doesn't. Puck absent-mindedly kicked his mace as he talked. I don't know what kind of talent he was born with, but he goes and appoints himself Palom hero? Nobody asked for one. Making others think Paloms can do anything if they tried. Doesn't that make it seem like the rest of us haven't tried at all? You hate Finn? Ace asked, a bit unsure. Puck didn't say anything at first, making Ace think she made the Palom angry. Before the swordswoman could offer an apology, Puck opens his mouth to speak. Boom! Only to get cut off as Meryl had finished her spell and set it off, creating a hole in the wall big enough for everyone to walk through. Let's go, Asfi said as she took the lead. All units, maintain formation. Seeing that the time for talk was over, Puck hurried on over to take vanguard along with those of the same position. Ace watched the Palom go before she followed after the group through the hole in the wall. What awaited her and the rest of the part was a cave of greenery. The ground felt like stepping on patches of grass and dirt, while the cave was illuminated by strange-looking flowers that decorated random spots on the wall. I've never seen anything like this, Jose, an animal person with raccoon ears and a scar over his right eye, said as he and others looked around them with uncertainty. These fleshy walls, it's like they're coating the dungeon. A cat person by the name of Tabitha commented as she pinched a section of the wall. Ace kept to herself as she surveyed her surroundings with suspicion. She and everyone already knew that there was something wrong about this place, and that feeling only increased as they all continued forward. Wah! Golmith, a human donned in full armor reminiscent to a turtle shell, cried out, causing everyone to turn around to see the hole which they came through had closed up. The wall. Calm down, Asfi said. It's not as though we've lost our escape route. All we have to do is open up another hole. Those words got everyone to calm down a little. True to Asfi's words, all they needed to do was make another hole to escape through, which meant they weren't trapped. Hey, mind if I say something creepy? Lilyun spoke up as she stomped on the ground. What if these wiggly, twitchy, gross walls are really part of some monsters? The Chianthrope gulped at this part and started to sweat. And we're just walking deeper into its stomach? Hey, cut that out. That's no joke. And so on were the reactions of others who were only stopped by Asfi yelling, "Quiet!" After that freak-out episode, the party continued on, making sure to stay close and in their respective positions as they surveyed their surroundings. Eventually, the group came to a stop at a forked road. Ace said as the path before them had split off. Lilyun. Asfi turned to the Chianthrope, who shook her head. It's not on the map, Lilyun said, double-checking the map in her hands before shaking her head again. Which means our pre-existing maps won't be much use anymore, Asfi concluded before addressing the Chianthrope again. Lilyun, start mapping. You can make one as we're moving, right? No problem, Lilyun said, stashing away the map in her hands before taking out from her bag some paper and pen, and immediately got to writing as the group picked a path and got moving. Curious, Ace went over to Lilyun's side and peeked to see the Chianthrope's work. Amazing, the swordswoman praised the Chianthrope. You can make maps. HM? You think so? Lilyun said, blushing a little at the praise. I'm happy that you praised me, but don't forget that I'm a thief. Ace hummed to herself as looked at the map Lilyun was drawing and checked to see the path they were currently on to compare. How do you know which way is which? Magnetic compasses don't work in the dungeon. This one's here got a nice little trick. Before Lilyun could explain herself, a human by the name of Keeks stepped in, leaning on Lilyun much to her annoyance. She's a living compass. She knows which way is which no matter where she goes. Observe. Suddenly, without warning, Keeks spun Lilyun around until she stopped and pointed at north. She then spun and pointed at two different directions. South, east. Wow, Ace said, impressed that the girl could tell which way is which. Bonk. Stop messing around, Asfi exclaimed after bonking on the heads of both Lilyun and Keeks. Shaking her head and recovering, Lilyun continued explaining to Ace. I keep myself aware of which way's north and draw a map in my head as we move. As long as I'm not stuck out at sea on a cloudy day or carried off somewhere blindfolded, I'll never get lost. It's not all that hard. Anyone could do it with a little practice. I can't. Me neither. That skill's pretty much useless in the regular parts of the dungeon, you know? I often explore shady ruins outside of Orario with Lord Hermes, Lilyun exclaimed before turning back to Ace while placing down a crystal she bought from the 18th floor to use as a landmark. Anyway, my maps are simply improvised sketches. The ones the guild hands out have better info and are a lot more accurate. Ace nodded at that. True to Lilyun's words, the guild does indeed sell maps, having amassed a large dictionary of map data. The reason adventurers nowadays can venture into the dungeon without constant trouble is thanks to pioneers dating back to ancient times who continuously challenged the unknown labyrinth to gather that information. With the exception of cartographers, the vast majority of adventurers lack the capability to draw their own maps in this era. That is to say, modern adventurers, including Ace herself, very rarely face the actual unknown. I see, so this is Ace thought to herself, coming to a realization. The 24th floor was normally a place Ace could easily solo on her own, but now was not the case. It had now become a place where adventurers stronger and smarter than herself could easily lose their lives. In short, she and the rest of the Hermes Familia were now exploring an unknown labyrinth, completely blind where death could be waiting for them at every corner. As of right now, they were venturing with their very lives on the line. It's a very scary place, ain't it? Ace nodded, admitting that this place was indeed scary, a feeling shared by the other members of the party. You just might die here. I might, but I won't, Ace said. There was a very good chance that she might die in this unknown labyrinth, but she also refused to die here. After all, there was still so much she had to do. With feelings of I might die here, and I refuse to die here etched in her heart, Ace advanced deeper into the labyrinth. Wait a minute, Ace thought to herself, realizing something who was talking to her. Turning her head to the right, the blonde swordswoman was met by a smiling face next to her. Hello there. Biting down a cry, Ace jumped back as did the rest of the Hermes Familia, who finally realized that they weren't alone and quickly reached for their weapons. Now, no need to get your panties in a twist, the mysterious smiling man said. No, wait, he wasn't smiling. Rather, the man was wearing a mask depicting a smiling face. Who are you? Asfi said, brandishing a dagger at the masked man who didn't seem the least bit threatened despite being surrounded right now. Who am I? The masked man pointed to himself as if checking to see if the woman was referring to him. Who is but the form following the function of what, and what I am is a man in a mask. I can see that, Asfi said while the rest of the party looked at the man in confusion. Of course you can. I'm not questioning your powers of observation. I'm merely remarking upon the paradox of asking a masked man who he is. You're dodging the question, that won't work. I am not trying to dodge your question. I merely think you have bigger concerns than trying to find out who I am. Asfi raised an eyebrow at that. And what would that be? The masked man simply pointed up and said, "Look up." At this did everyone raise an eyebrow at him in confusion. But Ace, she was the first to take notice. "Above," she shouted, prompting everyone to look up and gasp as snake-like monsters with the heads of a Venus flytrap and manes of flower hung right above the entire party. And despite having no visible eyes, these monsters, Velas as the Loki familia has labeled them, looked hungry. "Everyone, prepare to fight back." Asfi shouted her orders as everyone soon got into their respective positions as fast as possible. "What are these things?" one of the party members shouted as vines shot out from the Velas, raining down whip-like attacks onto the party. "Don't use magic," Ace shouted over as she charged into the fray. "Physical blows won't work. Attack with blades." "Gah!" A pained cry caught Ace's attention, and she turned to see one of the Palom twins, Pak, getting knocked over by one of the vine whips. Immediately, she moves in to help, but, "Stay back," Pak shouts over to the sword princess, glaring right at her to not get involved. And Ace, dash, slice, does just that, slicing vines that were attempting to attack Marin and Dodon. "Are you okay?" Ace asked, and Marin nods her head thankfully, a bit flustered. "Lulyun," Asfi shouts over to the Chianthrope as they were both being chased by a small pack of Velas. "I want to make sure, are there magic stones located inside their mouths?" Yes, they are. "Now hurry up and do something." Lulyun cried out as she ran away in fright, past trauma fueling her legs. "That's what I'm doing," Asfi said as she took out small glass vial from her pouch and threw out back at the Velas, whereupon contact exploded, taking out most of the Velas chasing them. Burst oil. In short, they were carefully handcrafted hand grenades made with materials found outside of the city. Made by Asfi herself, they were liquid explosives using obia flare plants found around the volcanoes at the northern edge of the continent as a base. Only Asfi can create these scarlet bombs, as far as anyone knows. How they work is that when the glass case shatters and the contents are exposed to the air, they detonate. Each small vial is powerful enough to annihilate monsters from the middle floor levels. There's magic stones are located deep within their upper jaws. Asfi shouted over to the entire party. "Form teams of 3 or more, then engage." "You got it." Keek sent Asfi a 2-finger salute and a wink as he and Lulyun chose to provide support for Fulgur, who was now armed with a sword and shield. "Lulyun, you deal with those vines. I'll keep the main body in place." Fulgur shouted over the two, facing a Viola head-on. "Keeks, you aim for the magic stone. Focus." Doing as told, Lulyun was a blur to the naked eye as she used her short sword to cut the vines trying to attack them, while Fulgur held his ground against the Vela's main body, using his shield to keep the monster's jaws from chomping down on him. There was a visible struggle as the War-Tiger kept the monster's mouth open, revealing the magic stone located in its upper jaw and giving Leeks the chance to throw a stone hard and fast enough to destroy the stone, killing the monster. "Heh, now, how's that for control and stone-throwing skills?" Keeks smiled to himself, gloating a little. Soon enough, with every member working together, the number of Velas grew thinner and thinner until there was only one left, with both the Palom twins taking it on alongside a well-built woman by the name of Eulalie. "Just a little more," Eulalie said, armed with 2 great shields as she stood in front of the twins. "Both of you, fall back." However, to Eulalie's surprise, Pak broke away from the group and charged straight at the Viola. "Ha! Pak? Huh? Why the heck did I charge?" Pak thought to himself as he leaped forward, mace drawn back as he stared down the jaws of the Viola. Why-oh, Umdo, you hate Finn? It's all because of her, huh? Pak thought to himself, thinking back to the question the Sword Princess had asked him. Does he hate the Palom who stood out amongst all other Paloms? Does he hate the Palom who was over twice his age? Does he hate the so-called hero of the Palom? Does he hate Braver Finn? Braver my ass. Yeah, it's all his fault, Pak thought to himself, literally in the jaws of the enemy, as his mace was the only thing keeping him from being Viola food. Reaching behind him, the Palom draws a dagger, though for someone his size it may have been a short sword to him. Time after time, he keeps lighting a fire in my heart. Does he hate Finn? The answer, no. He absolutely respects him. So how can I just sit back and watch? Pak cries out to himself as he thrusts the dagger forward, destroying the Viola's magic stone and causing it to stop moving. Quickly, the Palom jumps out of the dying monster and rolls on the ground a few times before coming to a stop as the Viola he just killed disintegrated into ashes. Pak! Pot cried out in worry for her twin brother as she and everyone else hurried over to the reckless Palom's side. Both Pak and Pot are members of the Vanguard by their own choice, Asfi started talking to Ace as they made their way over to the Palum twins. In order to grow faster, they're willing to take the risk. Are you okay? Anything broken? Pot asked as she helped her brother up. That was way too reckless. I'm fine, Pak insisted. And don't you all come over here, it'll make me look uncool. Huh. Ace noticed something. The dagger the Palum was holding, it looked familiar. That dagger. It's a replica, Pot said. My little brother here got one made just like Bravers in celebration of ranking up. Drives me crazy, Pak spoke up, sighing a little. Nobody asked him, but at some point, he became a hero for Palums everywhere. Ace spoke up, careful with her words. Would you like me to introduce you to Finn sometime? Exclamation point. Both the twins looked at Ace in surprise. Pot was starry-eyed while Pak's face became flushed. No, not yet, Pak said, looking to the side to hide his flushed face. I still haven't done anything worth his attention. But I wouldn't mind getting something like his autograph. Pak was snapped out of his stupor by the sounds of his fellow Familia members smiling at him. Why you all? Stop staring, Pak exclaimed, waving his dagger around as everyone simply ran away smiling and giggling. Clap, clap, clap. A slow, echoing clap drew everyone's attention as they all turned to see the mysterious masked man, who had gone completely forgotten during the fight, leaning his back against the wall and clapping at them. Bravo! Good show, yes good show, the masked man said as he continued clapping. With the fighting now over, Ace and everyone else finally got a good look at him. Besides the top hat and smiling mask pointed out earlier, the man was well-dressed, wearing a black high-collar duster coat over a suit with a cape over the shoulders. There was a rose popping out from his right breast pocket, though it looked to be fake. Multiple belts were wrapped around a pair of black pants, as what appeared to be crossbow bolts were tucked away in custom-made holsters wrapped around the legs. Wait a minute, Ace thought, something clicking in her mind when she took in the masked man's appearance. Wasn't he? You, Asfi spoke up, unknowingly interrupting Ace's thoughts as she and the others immediately put up their guard again, pointing their weapons at the man who didn't seem the least bit threatened by them. If anything, despite the mask covering his face, he seemed amused. To see that Finn has such a fan, it seems the old squirts managed to achieve his goal. Good, the masked man said, speaking mostly to himself. Ace raised an eyebrow at this, noticing how the masked man referred to her captain in a familiar tone as if personally knowing the Palum. Are you the one behind all this? Asfi said while pointing her dagger at the man. The appearance of those villas coinciding with this man's appearance was timed too perfectly, leading the woman to believe the man was somehow involved behind this strange labyrinth. However, much to the surprise of everyone, the masked man started chuckling as if being told a good joke. What's so funny? Pak shouted. What's funny is that you think I have anything to do with all of this. The mask gestured to the area around them. In truth, I'm just as clueless as you people are. I knew the dungeon tended to be strange, but a radical change such as this is completely new to me. Things certainly have changed since I've been away. If you're not involved in this, Ace spoke up, interrupting the man's musing. Then who are you? Who am I? The man said, tilting his head playfully and pointing to himself. For a second, Ace thought the man was about to play word games with them again, much like he did earlier. Screech. When suddenly, a viola suddenly came down from above, having hidden in the shadows this entire time. Quickly, everyone moved to intercept as the viola targeted the masked man who did nothing and continued to just lean on the wall. But then, bam! It all happened so fast, even for someone like Ace. In 1 second, the masked man kicked the attacking viola right in the jaw, actually sending the plant-like monster flying back despite Ace's knowledge that blunt damage was ineffective. Slam! In another second, the masked man went and grabbed the viola by its jaw and pulled down, slamming the monster down to the ground hard enough that the impact echoed throughout the labyrinth. Placing one foot on its bottom jaw, the masked man then grabbed the upper jaw and pried open the monster's mouth. Re-yip! With seemingly no effort whatsoever, the masked man then used his free hand, reached inside the monster's mouth, and proceeded to rip out its magic stone, killing the monster. All of this, plus the earlier actions, was all done in 3 seconds flat. You missed one? The masked man pointed out as he held the viola's magic stone to his masked face. Unlike a normal magic stone, which was usually purple with a reddish-orange hue at the center, the magic stone in the man's hands was yellow with a blackish hue at the center. I don't remember magic stones looking like this, the masked man said to himself, examining the stone in his hand before noticing the flabbergasted looks everyone was sending him. Oh, forgive me, you wanted to know my name. Yes. Putting the strange magic stone in his pocket, the man tipped his hat at the party and bowed. I have gone by many names and titles in the past, but if you must call me anything, then please call me Marvelous Chester. Chapter 12, Grace 12 Vendetta. Dungeon, 24th floor. Shoot, sniper of the fairies. Penetrate, arrow of absolute accuracy. Arc's ray. Shum. A beam of light shot forward and destroyed the charging monsters coming from behind. With the back covered, Lafia quickly ran back in order to catch up with the rest of the group. Up ahead, another group of monsters consisting of hobgoblins, dragonfly-like monsters known as gun libellula, and lizardmen all armed with natural weapons. The first two were no problem as Bet was a blur, killing the first two monsters before they knew what hit them. As for the lizardmen, Phylvis faced them all on her own, fighting back with her short sword while at the same time chanting a spell. Sweep, all right, the coast is clear. Let's get moving, we're almost to the pantry, Bet said as the group resumed moving, completely unaware that they were being followed. So that's how magic is cast here, Bell thought to himself as he hid in the shadows despite his armor. For the last hour, the armored adventurer had been following the trio, discovering that the 24th floor was indeed flooded with monsters. Of course, thanks to his stealth skills and his half-clean armor masking his scent, he had gone undetected. Chanting like that seems like a hassle. Also, why did that Lafia girl just stand there instead of moving around like the black-haired one? The voice in Bell's head commented. Bell, as per usual, ignored it as he figured the Loki elf wasn't as skilled as the black-haired elf. It took him quite a long time to move around while casting sorceries himself. But now wasn't the time to get caught up in memories. With the unusual influx of monsters on this floor as well as the rush the trio seemed to be in, Bell concluded that something was happening down here. And as someone who had grown to dislike being uninformed about the world around him, he was going to find out what was going on. Much like every problem he tackled, Bell was going to remain focused, allowing nothing to distract him from bling. From the corner of his vision, Bell noticed something sparkling under the artificial lighting of this floor. It was a creature whose body was made up of stone and had a noticeable huge crystal on its back. Bell blinked his eyes, recognizing the creature, and found himself staring at it in disbelief. It was a crystal lizard. Shing. Is something wrong? Lafia asked Bet, who suddenly stopped running and looked behind them. The werewolf narrowed his eyes at the path behind them but could not see, hear, or smell anything unusual. Must have been my imagination, Bet said as the three resumed running, completely unaware of Bell beating the crystal lizard to death with the end of his sword behind a bush as the voice in his head kept screaming and repeating, "Kill it!" Had Bell's helmet been off of him, one would have been greatly disturbed by the expression on the undead's face. Marvelous Chester, Asfi repeated as she and everyone stared at the masked man who chuckled at them. Yes, that is my name, the newly introduced Chester said, tipping his hat back up. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Hermes Familia. How's old Pan doing? Still getting into trouble with that god of yours? Pan? Asfi raised an eyebrow at that, as did the other members of her familia. It took the blue-haired woman a second to realize who Chester was talking about before narrowing her eyes at him, almost glaring at him. Panis in? Former Captain Panflock? Former captain? Chester raised an eyebrow under his mask before realizing what Asfi was saying inside. Ah, he passed away. Shame, I quite liked him. I still owed him a drink. You talk as if you knew him, Asfi said while trying to figure out who this man was, and how he knew the former captain of her familia who had passed away 10 years ago. Of course I knew him. He and I were old drinking buddies, Chester said, chuckling as he seemed to be reminiscing before he gazed at Asfi from top to bottom. Despite the mask covering his face, many felt the man's expression matching his mask. And judging by how you talk, I'm gonna guess you're the new captain. I must say, Hermes' taste in women sure hasn't changed while I've been gone. Not that I'm complaining, of course, far from it. Asfi felt her eye twitch as she quickly realized that the masked man was, how did Hermes say it? Checking her out. Before she could say anything though, Ace suddenly stepped forward, her sword still pointed at Chester. Who are you? She demanded. Chester in response tilted his head which, to her confusion and displeasure, strangely reminded her of Bell. Did you not hear me the first time? I said I'm. That's not your name, Ace interrupted the masked man, slightly glaring at him. That name belongs to Loki's first child. My senior. Loki? Chester turned his full attention to Ace as if fully registering her presence for the first time. Then, surprising everyone, he started laughing. Oh ho ho, I thought I recognized that scent of yours. You're from Loki's familia. My scent? Wait, do I smell like Loki? Ace blinked dumbly before suppressing the urge to shiver as she made a mental note to take a long bath when she got back home. Well, Loki must have scored lucky if she has someone like you in her familia. Yes, very nice. Ace felt her eye twitching at the masked man checking her out now. Yet, to her confusion, despite the fact that the masked man was the one speaking, she felt the inexplicable urge to stab Loki instead. How is that fox-eyed redhead doing? Still skirt-chasing after elves and anyone with a decent butt and rack? Chester asked as he started walking over to Ace. You didn't answer my question, Ace said as she stopped the masked man from going any further, placing her sword right at his neck. Now, no need to get violent. I've been completely honest with you from the very beginning, Chester said as he placed his right forefinger on the tip of Ace's desperate and pushed. Guh! Ace let out a grunt of surprise as she found herself pushed and stumbling back. Quickly regaining her footing, Ace looked up at Chester in surprise, who laughed at her. Enough! Asfi cried out as she, Fulgur, and Jose all held blades at Chester's neck, who didn't seem the least bit bothered at the fact that his neck was surrounded by sharp steel. Since asking about your identity is getting us nowhere, I'll instead ask this. What are you doing here? You say you have nothing to do with what's happening right now, but your appearance here makes me think otherwise. Oh, come now. Does this look like the face of a liar? You're wearing a mask, Lilyun pointed out. Aren't we all? Chester said as he leaned against Dodenwaite. What? Everyone turns in surprise to see Chester right next to the masked item carrier. Looking back to where Chester was previously, Asfi and the others found that the spot Chester was previously standing in was now empty. I mean, look at this guy, Chester pointed at Dodon, patting the masked man on the back. I can't even tell if this guy is a human or something else. Are you a dwarf? Perhaps some sort of cow person? Would explain the horns on your head. Get away from him, Asfi exclaimed as Ace was the fastest to react, reaching towards Chester in order to grab and restrain him, yet her hand caught nothing but air. Now, what did I say about getting violent? Chester said, appearing behind the Paolum twins, surprising everyone again at how he seemingly just appeared behind the twins when he wasn't even close to them. Two couldn't see his movements. Ace thought to herself in disbelief. She was LV6, and yet despite her increased stats she could not perceive Chester's movements. There were no sounds, no indication that the masked man had moved at all. He had moved in the literal blink of an eye. Just who is this man? Everyone thought as they stared cautiously at Chester, who seemed amused by their reactions. Should you all really be staring at me like that? I mean, I'm quite flattered, but we're about to have some company, Chester said as he pointed over to a forking path as emerging from both pathways were more Velas. TCH, everyone, get into formation. Asfi quickly threw out instructions, choosing to prioritize their survival over Chester. They're coming from behind too, Lilyun shouted as from behind the group came more Velas. Soon enough, the group found themselves surrounded by 3 different sides. Analyzing the situation before them, Asfi moved over to Ace to give her assigned task. Sword Princess, can I ask you to take care of one side? The blonde swordswoman was the strongest person in their group, proven by the fact that before coming here Ace had taken care of a monster horde single-handedly. If they were to survive, they had to divide their work accordingly. Understood, Ace said, accepting her task with no protest. Glancing over at the man claiming to be Chester, he was nowhere to be seen. What? Where did he? Focus, Sword Princess, Asfi shouted, making Ace focus back on their current situation. Wherever the masked man had run off to, it was none of their concern now. Right now they all had one job to do. Survive and find out the source of this labyrinth. Let's go, Asfi cried out as the group broke off into different groups, with Ace being noticeably alone to face her side of the Velas. As Ace came to a stop to face her enemies, her eyes widened in surprise before she jumped forward. Leaping past the Velas as strange, reptilian-like pillars suddenly rained down from above, killing the Velas, attacking her and almost squashing her had she not moved. Getting up, Ace soon saw that the pillars had formed a wall, cutting her off from the rest of the party. I was separated. Seems that way. Ace jumped before turning to her right, where standing right next to her was Chester. She quickly jumped away and pointed her sword at him, but the masked man seemed more interested in the pillars, cutting her off from the rest of the party. I must say, I do not remember the dungeon acting like this at all. How curious. Chester seemingly finally noticed Ace and the way she was looking at him. Oh, come now, don't look at me like that. I had nothing to do with this. I don't believe you, Ace said, slowly circling around Chester in case he tried to move. You're too suspicious. Well, I am wearing a mask. I'd have to question your sanity if you didn't find me suspicious, Chester said, laughing at Ace's attempt to gauge him. But rest assured, I mean you no harm. Ace stopped circling Chester, not because of what he said, but because of a new presence in the area, one that she was familiar with. Our guest, on the other hand, seems to have quite the interest in you, Chester said, looking over Ace's shoulder to see who had arrived. It was a well-endowed, pale-skinned woman with short red hair and green eyes. She wore a red leotard-like outfit with red sleeves and boots, and light purple leggings and bracers. A tattered black cloth hung around her waist and seemed to imply that her outfit may not have been hers originally. Well, what do we have here? Chester said, whistling as he checked out the red-haired woman, much to Ace's annoyance, who had the unexplainable urge to stab Loki again. Why, hello there, madam. May this kind masked gentleman here ask thee for thy name. To think you'd come of your own accord. Oh, you're ignoring me. But this is just what I wished for, the red-headed woman said, sending an expressionless stare at Ace. Long time no see, Arya. Arya? Chester raised an eyebrow behind his mask before turning to Ace. I thought your name was Ace? What are you doing here? Oh, you're also ignoring me. Who knows? The redhead replied back. Then what is this place? Did you make it? Ace questioned the red-haired tamer while at the same time preparing herself for a fight. You don't need to know, the redhead replied, cracking her neck a little. There's someone that wants to meet you. You're coming with me, Arya. I'm not Arya. Arya is my mother. Stop speaking nonsense. There's no way Arya could have a child. But it doesn't matter if you aren't her. With an audible crack of her fingers, the red-headed woman plunged her hands into the ground, seemingly grasping something. I was only told the name Arya. Over and over she told me she wanted to meet Arya. As I obediently searched around, I finally found you. Raya. With a sound akin to tearing flesh apart, the woman pulled out an unnatural-looking single-edged sword from the ground. A natural weapon? Ace thought in slight surprise before raising her desperate in front of her. I'm taking you with me, the redhead woman declared before charging towards Ace. Clash. Off to the side, Chester looked between both women fighting each other, having no trouble tracking them as he moved his head back and forth to follow the fighting. After a few seconds of watching, Chester came to a conclusion. Well, I can clearly see you two are busy. I'll just mind my own business and take my leave from here, Chester said as he did just that. He noted how both women didn't seem to hear or even notice him anymore, too engrossed in their fighting. Chester couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Even after all these years, it's still hard to find a decent woman to talk to. Or perhaps my communication skills have grown rusty. Chester shrugged his shoulders as he continued walking down the unknown labyrinth. The sounds of fighting growing quieter and quieter the deeper he went until the only thing he was hearing were his own steps. Now then, reaching into his coat pocket, Chest pulled out the strange, richly colored magic stone he had torn off from the monster he had killed earlier. What are you? PSSSSSSSSSSST. Chester raised his head, hearing something that sounded like a whisper. He stood still, seemingly doing nothing until... Oh! Chester's expression started matching the mask he wore, grinning at the news he just received. So, he's finally made it down here. It's about time. I expected him sooner given his capabilities. Oh well, better late than never, as they say. Now then, how should Eam? Just as Chester was about to formulate a plan in his head, he noticed a light up ahead. Curious, the masked man continued forward and saw. Well now, what do we have here? Abandoned church. I can't believe this. Lily flinched at the loud volume Hestia screamed before looking down in shame. Lily apologizes. She has no excuse for her mess up. I gave you one job and you blew it, Hestia screamed, red-faced with both anger and frustration. How could let him out of your sight? Lily looked away for just a second and then he was gone. I didn't even hear him move. He was wearing full-body armor. How could you not hear him? I don't know. Maybe he's part ninja or something. Ugh! Hestia groaned as she dragged her hands across her face, her frustration increasing. Looking around, the goddess then noticed something. Where the heck is Sif? She's back at the dungeon, Lily answered. You mean Bell took her with him? Hestia asked. If that was the case, then maybe she didn't have to worry too much. Sure, Sif was a monster who seemed to hate everyone but Bell, and she had the vague feeling that there was more than meets the eye with that wolf. But there was no denying that the canine was loyal to the undead. So long as Bell wasn't alone, then all was good. Well. Oh, come on, Hestia screamed in her mind, trying very hard not to explode again as to hear what the Palum had to say. Master Bell didn't take Miss Sif with him. But you just said she was in the dungeon, Hestia pointed out. Lily said she was at the dungeon, Lily said, emphasizing the word at. Miss Sif is at Babel Tower sitting right next to the entrance to the dungeon. Lily thinks Miss Sif is waiting for Master Bell's return as she refused to move anywhere. You mean she's still over there? Hestia said as she looked out a window to gaze at Babel Tower and the setting sun in the distance. She wouldn't budge no matter what Lily did. Ugh. This just what I needed, Hestia sarcastically groaned, running her hands across her face again and feeling very tired all of a sudden. Lily doesn't think it's that bad, Lily said. I mean, this is Master Bell we're talking about. With how strong he is, I'm sure he can take care of himself. Can't argue against that, Hestia muttered, knowing full well just how strong Bell was. Despite her worries, Bell was strong enough to venture into the middle floors of the dungeon solo. And after all the tales he's told her of his exploits so far, she couldn't imagine anything posing a challenge to her child. Yeah, he'll be fine. I mean, what could possibly happen to him? Oh, fuck me. Dungeon, 24th floor. Whoosh boom. An explosion of fire easily blew a hole into the wall of the labyrinth. Not minding the smoke one bit, Bell stepped into the unknown labyrinth, looking around curiously. What is this place? Bell thought to himself as he walked forward, taking note of how rough the ground felt underneath his boots. It was like he was stepping over fresh dirt covered in moss. Something tells me this isn't usually something that happens in the dungeon. Bell mentally nodded with the voice in his head, coming to the same conclusion. Of course, considering said voice was a figment of his imagination, he shouldn't be that surprised that they were sharing thoughts. Perhaps he should talk to someone about this? Storing the thought away for another time, Bell began walking as the hole he made began to close up. He wasn't worried about not being able to get out, already knowing that he could just make another hole if he wanted to. But right now, he had to focus on finding the group he had lost during his rush to kill the crystal lizard. It had dropped a chunk of titanite, so he didn't regret his decision one bit. Perhaps I should have brought Sif with me, Bell thought to himself as he came upon a fork, facing two tunnels that both lead to who knows where. Had he had his faithful companion with him, she'd have been able to track them Bet's group via smell. But seeing as Sif was still somewhat uncomfortable with being in the dungeon, the wolf hit it really well, but Bell had a keen eye for spotting things. He'd decided not to drag the monster canine down here with him as an act of kindness. Well, guess I should go with my gut, or what's left of it anyway, Bell thought as he was about to take a path. Caw! When the sound of a cry started him, making him instinctively reached for the broadsword that used to belong to one of the men that had tried to use Lily to ambush him. Looking for the source of the cry, the sound of flapping wings reached Bell's ears, and he looked up to see a crow flapping its wings in the air above him before descending down towards him, landing on an outstretched hand offered to it. The crow cawed again, and Bell instinctively held out his free hand to the black-feathered bird, who reached for something under its wing and dropped it into Bell's hand. This is Bell blinked as he stared at the single piece of valise in his hand. Blinking again, the undead looked at the crow in realization. You're the crow from the church. Caw! It cried out before flapping its wings again, taking to the air. Flying over to one of the paths, the blackbird flew around it for a while before flying through it, cawing a few more times in the process. I think it wants you to follow it. Something wrong. I don't like this, Bell said before following after the crow. Something about this seemed fishy to him. This crow seemed more intelligent than it seemed, and it had given him a valise coin, no doubt in exchange from when he gave it a magic stone yesterday. Exchanging items with a crow. You. Give me warm. Give me soft. It's just like snuggly, Bell thought, remembering the talking crow back in the Undead Asylum. He never actually met the bird face to face, having only heard its voice whenever he went to trade something with it. Could this crow perhaps be related? Caw! The crow's cry echoed from the path it took, crying as if to beckon him to hurry. Still somewhat suspicious of the bird, Bell did what he always does when faced with the unknown. He drew his sword and advanced forward. Boom! Not even a second later, when he stepped into the chosen tunnel, did the wall to his right exploded as someone came crashing through it. Coo! Damn it! Revis cursed under her breath as she picked herself up, holding up her weapon, which showed clear signs of damage as the blade had chips of varying sizes. Had enough! From the newly made hole in the wall stepped out Ace, brandishing her sword. Her figure was slightly banged up, but compared to Revis, who had cuts all over her, the sword princess was in better condition and showed who was winning the fight. Miss Ace. Hearing her name from a familiar voice, Ace blinked in confusion before turning to her left to see Bell staring at her and Revis, his face covered by his helmet, as always. Bell? Ace blinked in both surprise and confusion. What was he doing here? Meanwhile, Revis looked between Ace and Bell and soon figured that the two were friends or at least acquaintances. Seeing as how she was slowly, much to her anger and frustration, losing to Ace, the red-haired tamer leaped towards Bell in order to use him as leverage against the blonde swordswoman. Ace clearly saw this and quickly moved to intercept the woman. As for Bell, who now had two women charging straight at him, he did the first thing his instincts told him to, raise his shield. Lul Yun, get away. Boom. Tach Thane. An explosion? Kenseki. These guys are suicide bombers. To say the situation was getting out of hand would be an understatement. It was complete and utter chaos. After the Hermes group had been separated from Ace, they had no choice but to continue forward without her after dealing with the Velas. After some time, they had finally reached the pantry only to find it had been taken over by a sort of parasitic plant monster. Quickly figuring out that this was the source of the labyrinth, the team went to investigate only to find that a group of Evolus members was occupying the floor. Under Asphai's orders, they had attempted to capture some of the Evolus members only to find that each and every member had straps of Kinseki, an item dropped from the monster flame rock that explodes when exposed to fire, wrapped around their waist, and with tears in their crazed eyes. Boom boom boom. The members of Evolus rained suicide attacks onto Asphai's team, shocking them with this unbelievable act. Forgive my sins, Sophia. Reina. Clear my department with this. Oh, Julius. Boom boom boom. One by one, Evolus members were shouting random nonsense before they pulled the plug, willingly ending their own lives in an attempt to weaken the Hermes group who could nothing but retreat lest they caught in the ensuing explosions. Comrades, do not fear death. Our desires lay beyond them. Far in the back, another Evolus member wearing a darker coat cried out towards his comrades, arms spread out as if to preach to all that could hear him. Show your devotion to our God. Boom. They're shouting the names of gods. No, the names of people? Asphai thought, trying to quickly process what was going on right now. Is this what their God desires of them? Are they showing their devotion through their own deaths? She's heard how some people were completely devoted to the gods they served and had sometimes seen for herself how unusual they expressed it. But this was beyond comprehension. Just what are we fighting against? Asphai muttered, sweating due to how chaotic it was below her. You're fighting crazy people, obviously. Wah! Thinking that an enemy had snuck up on her, Asphai drew her knife and swung to her right only for a hand to grab her arm, stopping her attack as the blade of the knife stopped right at the neck of. Now, no need to be so jumpy. It's just me, Chester said, chuckling at the blue-haired woman. You? Yes, me. Marvelous Chester. Remember? We met not too long ago, Chester said, releasing Asphai's arm before turning to look down at the chaos below them. I must say this is quite the sight. All those men and women willingly killing themselves. It's absolutely horrendous. Yes, magnificently so. Mwahahi. Yuri laughing? Asphai said, seemingly appalled by Chester laughing at all this chaos. Why? We need those people alive in order to figure out what is going on here, Asphai said, still glaring at Chester. And besides that, the loss of life is no laughing matter, especially something like this. My, aren't you the model student? Chester said in a mocking tone before pointing to his left. By the way, you might want to look behind you. Raising an eyebrow in confusion, Asphai followed his finger and gasped when a group of Velas suddenly appeared from behind their position. I suggest you start running, Chester said before he took off, leaving Asphai behind. Wait, you coup! Asphai grunted as she quickly moved out of the way of an incoming Viola before quickly shouting over to the others. Fulgur! Hearing his captain, the War-Tiger quickly turned and brought his shield up in time to block an incoming Viola. He breathed a quick sigh of relief only to gasp when the Viola snatched up an Evolus member who screamed as the Viola's teeth stabbed into him. They're attacking indiscriminately? You gotta be kidding me? Lulyun exclaimed as the Viola turned around and headed straight for them only for the Evolus member in its mouth to detonate his Kinseki bombs, blowing up and killing the Viola as it crashed right in front of the group, throwing them back. Ow, some of them groaned as they picked themselves back up. Fuck. Do they not care about how they die so long as they damage us? As if to answer them, from the smoke came more Evolus members who all attacked as some of them were caught by more Velas in the process. Yet those attacking Lulyun and the others didn't even seem to mind or register what was happening. They're insane, Lulyun exclaimed as she and the others drew back from the chaos before them. This is bad, Asphai thought to herself, analyzing the situation before her. In addition to the suicide attacks coming from Evolus, they now had to deal with indiscriminate attacks coming from the Velas. Once again, things were in total chaos. They can't turn around and retreat as that would be showing their backs to their enemies. However, the man in white, Asphai thought, spotting a white-haired man garbed in white and covering his face with a bone mask. The way he moved before the Vela's appearance most likely meant that he was a tamer controlling the plant-eating monsters. While it's absurd, to Asphai's knowledge, to try and tame such a number of giant monsters, everything up until now seems to have been because of the white tamer. Which means, Fulgur, take over as commander. Gather everyone and endure their attacks, Asphai quickly said as she ran past her comrades, making a feeling towards the white tamer. If he was the leader behind all this, then surely taking him out will end all this. Miss Asphai. Hearing her name, Asphai glanced behind her to see Keeks following right behind her. Please allow me to support you. I'm counting on you, Asphai said, much to Keeks' surprise, who thought she would deny him. Yes, Keeks replied with a big smile and blushing cheeks. Careful now, monkey. Your face will get stuck if you smile that hard. Ha! Hearing a voice next to them, Asfi and Keeks turned to their left to find Chester running with them backward. You! Keeks exclaimed until he realized what Chester had just called him and turned red. Hey, who you calling a monkey? Well, I mean, your sideburns are quite long and those ears of yours are just so big. It's enough to make me want to grab and twist them like some old nanny, Chester said, looking ready to do just that. Why are you here? Asfi intervened, sending a questioning look/glare at the masked man. Well, I figured since all the action's happening right here I should get a closer look to enjoy the show, Chester said. Is this all just a game to you? Asfi said, really starting to dislike Chester's non-serious nature. A game? Please, if this were a game I'd be participating and having fun, Chester said. No, this is halftime entertainment for me. Entertainment? Keeks exclaimed, appalled by this hat-wearing masked stranger. Ignore him, Keeks. Focus on the enemy, Asfi shouted as the two, plus Chester, were approaching enemies. Leave it to me, Keeks said, focusing on the situation while also trying to show as he grabbed throwing stones from both his pouch and from the ground and began throwing them at the Evolus members coming towards them. Gah! Ack! Guh! Do not falter, the Evolus commando shouted to House subordinates. It's just a thrown weapon. There's a limit, Gah! Idiot! Keeks said, smiling smugly as his thrown stone hit the commando. This is the dungeon. There's no way I'd run out of throwing stones. Seriously? Stones? Chester commented, unimpressed. You really are a monkey. You shut up, like you could do any better. Oh please. Chester took out a throwing knife which had a rose-shaped mold at the end of the handle. All it takes is one. Both Asfi and Keeks didn't even have a chance to blink as Chester's arm blurred before a loud scream drew their attention. Embedded into the head of an Evolus grunt was the knife Chester had been holding half a second ago. Not only that, but the grunt had accidentally pulled the string that detonated his Kanseki bombs. As his whole body exploded, the explosion caught two other members that had been standing next to the grunt, and the fire from the explosion set off their Kanseki bombs. Soon enough a chain reaction went off as multiple explosions occurred right in front of Asfi and Keeks as they and Chester now had a smoke-filled clear path towards the Evolus commando. To say Asfi and Keeks were impressed was an understatement. And that's how it's done, Chester said, his tone bragging as Keeks' jaw dropped in disbelief. All my men, the Evolus commando muttered in disbelief at how quickly his men had been dealt with so easily. Slash. The commando couldn't even grunt out a pained cry as Asfi had run up and slashed his neck before running off ahead, leaving the commando to choke on his own blood. He dealt with all those men with just a single knife, Asfi thought, glancing back at Chester with newfound caution. The level of skill it would take anyone else to accomplish what he did, and yet he made it seem so easy. Just who was this masked man? No, I can't focus on that right now. What I need to focus on, Asfi turned her sights on the white tamer, her knife held at the ready, is to take him down. You should have let yourself be eaten by the Velas, the tamer said as vines suddenly erupted from the ground in front of Asfi. Kill her. Guh! Asfi grunted as she was forced to quickly jump to the right, dodging the vines which stabbed into the ground behind her. You move well, adventurer. Or should I say, Perseus, the tamer said, speaking Asfi's alias. Nevertheless, die. Just as he said that did another Viola appear right in front of Asfi, leaving her no way to dodge due to the distance between them. However, Talaria. Whoosh. The Viola chomped down only to bite into thin air. Confused, it looked around until the sound of flapping wings drew it and everyone's attention as they all looked up and froze. Why? Because their Asfi was up in the air as a pair of 4 wings sprouted from her sandals. To the disbelief of many. She's flying? An Evolus member said in utter disbelief. Chester let out a whistle through his mask as he looked up at the spectacle flying above him. Well now, aren't those a fine pair of wings? You made me use this. Now I misdispose of you, Asfi coldly said as she reached into her pouches and threw out handfuls of burst oil. Oh crap, Keeks exclaimed as he quickly dived out of the way. Oh dear, Chester said as he too moved out of the way of what was about to occur. Crackbone. The second the glass bottles holding the burst oil broke, die explosions go off, completely enveloping the Velas below and killing them. The white tamer quickly had a few nearby Velas circle around him in order to protect him from blast, and Asfi took this chance to fly around behind him before diving down towards him. I have you now, Asfi shouted, thrusting her dagger towards the tamer's back. Grab. What? Asfi gasped in surprise as just when her dagger was about to plunge into the tamer's back, said tamer turned around and grabbed her weapon with his bare hands, barely bleeding from grabbing the blade. Asfi quickly tried to pull away but found that the tamer had an iron grip on her weapon. Humph! With his other hand, The tamer grabbed Asfi by the collar of her cloak and threw her over his shoulder, slamming her hard on the ground. What strength, Asfi thought, gritting through the pain as she quickly got up and flew back to create some distance. However, the second she blinked, the tamer was gone from her sight. What? Where did he? You forgot something. Stab. Asfi's breath was caught in her throat as pain flared up from her stomach. Feeling blood rise up into her mouth, Asfi looked down to see her dagger stabbed right through her stomach. Behind her and the one holding the dagger was the white tamer himself. Miss Asfi, Keeks, as well as the other members of the party, all cried out in horror. Ooh, stabbed by your own weapon. I know the feeling, Chester commented before Keeks suddenly ran off to save Asfi. Ah, monkey, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Ah! Asfi let out a choked noise as she felt the blade of her dagger move up, making her wound bigger and worse as blood started rising up into her mouth. I know full well how tough you adventurers can be. You'd normally recover easily from this, the white tamer said as he continued to drag the dagger upward until it reached Asfi's chest, causing her to scream out in pain. There, this should prevent you from recovering quickly. However, you won't die from this. Bastard! From the smoke still left behind from Asfi's burst oil, Keeks jumped out and threw something at the tamer holding up his captain. Get your dirty hands off Miss Asfi! Boom! Whatever Keeks threw at the tamer blew up into smoke the second it struck him, causing him to let go of Asfi and stumble back holding his face. Miss Asfi! Hearing her name, Asfi gritted through the pain and looked up to see Keeks holding up the modified high potion she had given him earlier today. Please, use tea. Viola's. Pierce. Before anyone could even blink, a vine erupted from under Keeks and stabbed straight through his chest. The entire Hermes familia felt their hearts stop at the sight of their friend, whose body was held up by the vine going through him, and they watched with horrified eyes as the vine threw Keeks' body away like a ragdoll where it struck a nearby cliffside before falling to the ground, lifeless as blood spilled out from the hole in his body. KS Keeks. Struggling through the pain, Asfi desperately called out to her injured party member. With a wound such as that, his chances of surviving were GH. Gritting his teeth and fighting through the pain and blood, Keeks pushed himself up and lifted up the potion in his hands. Seeing what he was trying to do, Asfi shook her head. Keeks, no forget about me. Use item you hurry. Don't say that, Keeks said even as his lungs were damages and blood spilled from his eyes. This'll only save one of us. Keeks. Please Miss Asfi take tea. Squash. That's enough out of you, the tamer coldly said as he stomped down on Keeks' head, smashing it as if it were watermelon. Keeks! Asfi screamed in anguish as the potion Keeks was about to throw over to her rolled uselessly on the ground, stopping too far away for Asfi to grab. However, while the potion was too far away from Asfi to reach, it instead reached the feet of one marvelous Chester. Sigh, I tried to tell him. Chester sighed as he bent down and grabbed the potion Keeks had sacrificed his life to try and give to Asfi. Poor man died as he lived. A fool, the tamer said, turning to Chester. Oh yes, quite so, Chester said with a small laugh, earning a glare from Asfi. However, as it turns out, I'm rather fond of fools. Woman. Asfi blinked as Chester went and tossed the potion over to Asfi. Drink that. You. As if I'll let you, the tamer said as he dashed over to Asfi, moving faster than anyone in the room except for Chester. Pow. Guh. The tamer let out a surprised grunt as he was suddenly kicked back by Chester, who lowered his leg and stood right in front of Asfi. Now, don't be rude. The man you just killed gave his life for the woman he loved. It's one of the few better ways for a man to die and we should respect that. Who are you? The tamer demanded, brushing his chest as he faced the masked man. While he didn't show it, Chester's kick had actually hurt him. Forgive me for the late introductions. I am Marvelous Chester. Chester introduced himself, tipping his hat to the tamer. Pleased to make your acquaintance whoever you are. Chester? Never heard of you. Well, that's no surprise considering I've been gone for quite some time now. I'll have you know that I'm actually quite famous. I don't care, the tamer bluntly said as he dashed up to Chester and threw a punch towards his masked face. Grab. Behind his own mask, the tamer's eyes widened in surprise when Chester went and caught his fist with no signs of his strength damaging him. He threw his other fist at him only to get the same result as Chester now had the tamer by both hands. To the tamer's further disbelief, Chester began pushing him down until he was on his knees. He's stronger than me? Impossible. The tamer thought to himself, trying to overpower and push back Chester, but it felt like he was trying to move the ground itself. Completely useless. Now, why in such a rush? Chester said in a mocking tone. Why don't we take this time to get to know one another? As I said already, I've been away for quite some time, So I would like it if someone could catch me up on what's been going on lately. You'll help me, won't you? Why you, gritting his teeth. The tamer threw his head forward, trying to headbutt Chester's masked face. Kick. Only for his attempt to earn him a boot to the face. And to the shock of everyone here, Vilas included, Chester had kicked the tamer so hard that he rocketed upwards and crashed up into the ceiling of the floor. And considering how high said ceiling was, quite a lot of jaws dropped at Chester's feet. Didn't think he'd fly up that high. That doesn't usually happen to most people I face, Chester said, looking up to where he kicked the tamer before shrugging his shoulders. Guess I don't know my own strength. Wa Asfi, Haven drank the high potion and mostly recovered from her injury, stared at Chester in shock. The display of strength he just showed off was unlike anything the blue-haired captain had ever seen. She couldn't help but think to herself, what is he? Boom. Suddenly, a wall a distance away blew up, snapping Asfi from her thoughts as everyone turned to see pieces of Vilas flying, having been sliced up by something. Then, stepping out the newly made hole in the wall. Who the hell are you guys? Bet said, stepping on the head of a dead Viola as both Lafuya and Filvis stood behind him. For a second there I thought he had finally arrived, Chester said. Haven expected someone else to show up before turning to Asfi. Friends of yours? No. Asfi shook her head, finally healed enough to get back up to her knees before looking over at Bet's group. Butthats Vannergand and Thousand Elf of Loki Familia and Maenads of Dionysus Familia. Oh, so they're part of Loki's Familia too, Chester said, looking over at Bet and Lafia to get a better look at them while completely ignoring Filvis' presence. That werewolf's giving off the vibe of a bad boy, and that elf's pretty cute, very easy on the eyes. I can see why Loki added those two into her Familia. What is this place? Lafia wondered out loud, scanning the situation before her. She and the others had found a trail of crystal shards and followed it thinking it would lead them to Ace. But not only was their missing teammate not here, they had stumbled upon what seemed to be a very serious situation involving several forces all jumbled together. Hey! Bet spoke up to Lafia. I'll buy you some time. Get rid of those man-eating flowers in the meantime. Lafia nodded as she started gathering magical power. A bunch of Vilas soon flew towards her, attracted to her magic, but were stopped by both Bet and Filvis, who protected the elf from harm. An Evolus member tried to kill them by running up and pulling the plug on his bombs, but Bet kicked the grunt up into the air right next to other Vilas where he then promptly exploded, killing the Vilas closest to him. No way, one of the Palum twins muttered in disbelief at what Bet just did. The feeling was shared by everyone else except for Chester, who laughed and clapped at the display. Falling like rain, burn away the savages. What magic power, Meryl thought, shuddering under how much magic Lafia was displaying. Compared to her, the elf was a monster. Everyone, take cover. Under Meryl's warning, everyone quickly ran for cover as those bearing shields raised them in order to protect themselves from the incoming rain. Fusillade Phalarica. Finishing her spell and speaking its name, Lafia raised her staff as balls of flaming light gathered above the elf before they all became beams of light, bombarding the whole field and killing every Viola in it while remarkably not killing any of the Evolus members despite how destructive the elf's spell was. At the sight of this destruction, Chester laughed even more. Ha 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 ha, marvelous. Simply marvelous, Chester exclaimed, clapping at the destruction brought upon by the elf. You've picked up quite the interesting children while I was away, Loki. What's with this guy? Asfi thought as she stared at Chester, weirded out by his antics. Hey! Bet shouted, marching over to where Asfi and Chester were as the werewolf, with the other two elves following close behind, glared at the latter. You in the mask, are you behind this weird labyrinth? Me? Chester pointed at himself before shaking his head. Oh no, I have nothing to do with this. He's the one behind all this. Chester pointed his thumb over at an empty spot, except a second later it was empty no more as the tamer Chester had kicked earlier had finally come down and crash-landed, kneeling and glaring over at him. Good to see you finally decided to come down. How was the upper floor? Chester asked the tamer mockingly. You! The tamer heatedly glared at Chester as his mask was beginning to crack, threatening to break any moment. So yeah, go beat him up, Chester said, pointing Bet over to the tamer. Oh, and before you ask, marvelous Chester at your service. Don't tell me what to do, Bet said, already not liking the masked man until he noticed something. Wait a sec. What did you just call yourself? Marvelous Chester, he repeated. I've been introducing myself a lot today. Guess that's what happens when you meet a bunch of new faces one after another. Marvelous Chester, the bastard Loki told us to look out for? Bet said, glaring at Chester as he lowered his stance and held up his dual blades. Lafia did the same, holding up her staff in front of her. Oh, Loki's been looking? Marvelous. Instead of being intimidated like Bet and the others had expected, Chester spoke joyfully, which threw the group off balance. Hey, after you deal with the old geezer, could you be a good boy and deliver a message to her for me? That'd be great. Ish treating Bet like a dog? Lafia thought as the way Chester was acting towards them weirded her out. Are you treating me like a dog? Bet said, unknowingly echoing Lafia's thoughts. Well, you are part canine, aren't you? Chester pointed out before snapping his fingers in realization. Oh, do you need a treat first? From the looks of it, you must have rushed down here in a hurry. Unfortunately, my furry fellow, I do not have any bones on me. Chester then paused for a sec before checking the inside of his coat. At least, I don't think I do. You! A visible vein could be seen on Bet's head as he glared murderously at Chester, causing Lafia and some of the others to move slightly away from the angry werewolf. Yet, despite Bet's anger, Chester's mannerism was reminding him and Lafia of their goddess for some reason. Enough! An angry-filled shout brought everyone's attention back to the tamer, who seemed to have enough of Chester's antics as he waved his arm forward, summoning a group of Veelas behind him. Veelas! Kill them all! TCH! Bet clicked his tongue as he and everyone were forced to dodge out of the way. Chester, by far the calmest person here, called out to Lafia while pointing over at the new Veelas. Elfie, you missed a few. Excuse me? Lafia exclaimed, appalled at what Chester had just called her. Focus! Bet shouted over, slashing the charging Veelas as he advanced towards the tamer, making him top priority over capturing Chester, promising to deal with the smiling masked bastard later. We'll keep the stragglers busy, Asfi said as she and the other Hermes party members kept what remained of the Evolus grunts occupied while Bet's group dealt with the tamer. Adventurers, one after another, the tamer grumbled as he faced the werewolf head-on. Bet was the first to attack, swinging his twin swords at the tamer who ducked under them before getting behind the werewolf. He drew his hand back, preparing to stab Bet, but was quickly forced to raise his guard as the werewolf swung his right leg back, hitting the tamer's arm and forcing him back slightly. He's fast, the tamer noted as the spot Bet had kicked steamed a little, showing just how much power Bet had thrown in his kick. He's hard, Bet thought in contrast, noting how his foot felt like it was kicking a wall of hardened stone rather than flesh. Vannergand, I see the Loki familia, is it? The tamer said, realizing who Bet is. Did you come following the Sword Princess? What did you do with Ace? Bet demanded. My comrade is attending to her, the tamer said, smugly smirking. She's probably getting tortured right now, after having her arms severed or something like that. /// GUH. The tamer quickly raised his arms as blinding speed slashes sliced his arms. He looked up at Bet in surprise, shocked that he had suddenly gotten faster. I'll kill you, the werewolf stated as he glared heatedly at the tamer. Bet. Lafia stepped forward to help, only to be stopped by Filvis. Don't rush out, Miss Verdes, the black-haired elf said before pointing forward. To their eyes, as well as everyone of a similar level, the fight between Bet and the tamer was moving at a speed that made them hard to track. What speed? So this is how strong first-class adventurers are, Filvis said in slight awe. Yawn! A sudden yawn came from Chester, who stood right beside the elves, surprising them both as they had not heard and sensed him coming anywhere near them. HM? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I surprise you? Forgive me, it's just that this fight is taking longer than I thought it would, Chester said as he looked over at the fight between Bet and the tamer. Despite the mask covering his face, Lafia could somehow tell that the man appeared, to her astonishment, bored. Just who is this man? There's someone who's fighting evenly with Bet, yet he looks so unimpressed, Lafia thought, staring warily at the masked man who seemed to be growing impatient with the fight going on before them. Heck, he was even starting to tap his foot. Okay, this taking way too long, Chester said before turning to Lafia. Oi, elf girl, go help him. Excuse me? Do not talk to Miss Verdes that way, Filvis said, standing in between Lafia and Chester only for the latter to suddenly grab her face and push her away as if she were unimportant. You're a Loki Familia member too, aren't you? Hurry up and assist your comrade. How can I help when I can barely even follow them? Lafia exclaimed, slapping away Chester's finger only for him to flick her head. Ow! Quit your whining. You're an adventurer, aren't you? Use that brain of yours? Or is your good looks the only thing you have going for you? WYU. Lafia, annoyed and angry, turned away from Chester and looked over towards the battle before them, holding her staff in front of her. For some reason, despite her anger, she felt oddly motivated. Chester's words had struck at her insecurities, and she wanted to prove him wrong, that she was more than a pretty face who stood on the sidelines. Miss Filvis, please protect me, Lafia said as she started summoning forth magic. After picking herself up, Filvis nodded and, after throwing a glare at Chester, stood in front of Lafia protectively. Veelas! Suddenly, the tamer shouted, and a few seconds later, a small group of Veelas sprouted from the floor ceiling and attacked Bet, forcing him away from the tamer. These little unleashed streak of light, bough limbs of the holy tree. Lafia began chanting the second she saw the new Veelas. Knowing that they were attracted to strong magic, she planned to use herself to draw the Veelas away from Bet. However, forget the girl. Kill the werewolf first. At the tamer's command, the Veelas ignored the elf and went back to assaulting Bet, surprising both elves. Damn it! Filvis cursed as she quickly raced to aid the werewolf. You are an expert of the bow. I have no choice but to keep chanting, Lafia thought. While she was surprised that the Veelas had ignored her, she couldn't simply just stop the spell she was preparing. Luckily for her, she had decided to use her signature spell, though how much help it'll be will have to wait as she scanned the battle, trying to think of what she should do when she completed her spell. And it's not like this man is helping anytime soon, Lafia added in as she glanced over at Chester, who continued to just stand and watch things play out. From the way he crossed his arms and quietly hummed to himself, it was like he was silently judging them how they fought. And for some odd reason, it reminded Lafia of her captain whenever he was supervising new members of the Familia. Sweep, holy staff of crushing evil. Filvis began chanting as she aimed her staff at the tamer, attempting to help the werewolf. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Chester suddenly called out to the black-haired elf, but it was already too late. Dio Thursos, the elf shouted as from her staff came a blast of gold lightning. While the spell was able to kill the Veelas surrounding the tamer, the man himself forced his way through the spell to the elf's shock and disbelief. Too weak, the tamer exclaimed as he kicked the black-haired elf away before jumping after her. Raising a hand, the tamer went to finish the elf off. Die! Shit! Filvis cursed in her mind, having no way of evading this attack. She was really going to die if she didn't do anything. Her mind raced 1,000 miles, trying to come up with some way to dodge or at least minimize the incoming damage. Kick! Until the elf found herself kicked out of the way by none other than Bet, rescuing her from her death. However, even with this success came a new problem. Shit! Now I can't dodge. Bet thought as his outstretched leg was now in the path of the tamer. As one of the fastest adventurers in Orario, Bet's legs were his ultimate weapon. The tamer himself knew this as he smiled wickedly and brought down his hand onto Bet's leg. Kick! Only to be kicked in the face by, to Bet's surprise, Chester, whose kick was so powerful that it sent the masked tamer flying back and crashing into a distant wall so fast that even Bet himself had trouble tracking the flying tamer. Elf girl! Chester shouted over to Lafia, who had been slightly stunned by what Chester has done as well as how fast he moved. At the sound of his voice did she shake herself from her stupor and knew exactly what the masked man wanted from her. Her instincts taking over her further actions. Shoot, sniper of the fairies. Penetrate, arrow of absolute accuracy. Arc's ray, quickly finishing her chant. Lafia wasted no time firing it towards where the tamer had been kicked towards. An explosion of dust and flying rocks seconds later showed that her spell had hit its target. Over with Chester, Bet, and Filvis. The elf pushed herself back up to her feet while the werewolf was busy throwing a glare at Chester, who was dusting off his gloved hands. Why'd you help me? Bet asked, confused as to why the masked man had stepped in and saved him from what would have been a debilitating injury. The better question is, Chester began as he turned to the werewolf. Why didn't you kick him? Huh. The masked tamer. You do realize you could have kicked him away in order to save the black-haired elf instead of doing what you just did, right? Fuck you, was Bet's reply as he vainly turned his head away in order to hide how red his face was, realizing that he could have done what Chester just told him. It's under a response. You're definitely one of Loki's, Chester said, chuckling in amusement, which just made Bet redder though from anger this time than embarrassment. Looking over towards his right, Chester checked to see how Asfi's group was faring, and it seemed like they were just about done, taking down any remaining stragglers. Looks like they're just about done over there. Humph, I guess weaklings are good for something, Bet commented before looking over towards where the tamer was, smoke still obscuring his figure. However, Bet frowned when he felt his wolf ears twitch, picking up the faint sound of moving. Oi! Chester turned to the werewolf. Yes. How hard did you kick that bastard? I used half of my strength. Why? I simply wanted you and your comrade to be the ones who finished him off. After all, what kind of senior would I be if I hogged all the experience and left my juniors in the mud? Chester said before looking over towards where the tamer was as the smoke was starting to dissipate. Although, it looks like the elf girl's magic wasn't enough to kill him. Lafia looked over towards Chester and Bet, having heard what they had said, before looking over towards where she blasted the tamer. Even if she wasn't as strong as her familia's vice-captain, her magic wasn't something to scoff at. She actually took a bit of pride knowing that she was one Orario's strongest magic users. And yet, Close, but I'm afraid it was a futile effort. After all, my body that is loved by her wouldn't break from something like this. From the smoke came the masked tamer, except Chester's previous kick had utterly destroyed it, allowing everyone to finally see what the tamer looked like as his yellow-green eyes glared from under his long white hair. Everyone but Chester gasped at who they saw. It can't be. Asfi's eyes widened in disbelief at who was standing before them, her mind trying to figure how this man was here. Vendetta, Olivas act. Who? The tension was almost broken by Chester's innocent question, causing a few members to nearly trip and fall due to how ignorant he sounded. Vendetta, Olivas act. Lafia spoke up, explaining to Chester while never taking her eyes off the man before everyone. He was a member of Evelus and the one behind the 27th floor nightmare. 27th floor nightmare? What's that? Again, the tension was almost broken by Chester's question, causing the elf to almost trip and fall. You don't what that is either? I've been away from Orario for quite some time, so forgive me if I'm ignorant to a lot of things, Chester said with a small shrug of his shoulders. Olivas Act was a member of Evelus. Asfi spoke up, taking over the explanation as she stressed the was part. He was chased by adventurers and was eaten by monsters. His death was confirmed when all they could find was his lower body. So then, what's a dead man like him doing here? Bet said, glaring over at Olivas, who smiled smugly, taking joy at their confusion. Could he have been alive all this time? Lafia guessed. No, I did die, Olivas said as Lafia's magic attack had destroyed everything but the lower part of his clothes, revealing all the injuries he had sustained thus far, healing to the disbelief of many. If that wasn't shocking enough, with only rags covering his lower body, everyone got a good look at his chest and legs. The latter's skin was yellow-green like his eyes, appearing reptile-like, while the former, which had been carved open courtesy of Lafia's earlier attack, displayed a rich-colored magic stone embedded inside. His wounds are healing without the use of healing magic. Not to mention those legs and that richly colored magic stone in his chest. Beads of sweat dripped down from Lafia as she tried to comprehend what she was seeing right now. And because of her confusion, she couldn't help but ask, What are you? Olivas smiled at that as he gestured to himself and over to the remains of a viola. Human and monster. I am a supreme being with the powers of both. A hybrid between a human and a monster? Lafia thought, covering her mouth as the very thought of it made her sick. Don't fool around, Lilyun suddenly shouted. A remnant of Evelus is now half monster and playing tamer? How many adventurers do you think died because of you guys? Even Keeks. Don't group me up with garbage such as them. It's outrageous to be considered the same as those who are being played around with by the gods. And on top of that, being lumped into the same category of the child's play that is taming, Olivas said as he grabbed the viola remains and lifted it above his head. The Violas and I come from the same origin as her. The monsters obey me as her agent. This labyrinth is a plant, with the viscum parasitizing the pantry and mass-producing Violas. This is a midway point for lower floor monsters to be born within the higher floors, where we will eventually transport them up to the surface. A monster giving birth to other monsters? Asfi thought in disbelief as she looked up at all the tiny sprouts hanging from the ceiling, now realizing that they were really unborn Violas. Whatever was doing this was unlike any monster anyone's ever encountered. And that wasn't all. As far as Asfi knew, the dungeon was the only womb for monsters, a fact the gods have all confirmed to be true. And yet, this man is trying to destroy that fact, Asfi thought as she glared over at Olivas. Why? Why are you doing this? Olivas smiled evilly as he bluntly announced, to destroy Orario. What? Asfi exclaimed, a feeling shared by everyone here, except for Chester, who just yawned in response. Do you realize what you're saying? Orario is a lid. It's the only thing preventing monsters from reaching the surface. If it's destroyed, the surface will. Of course I do, Olivas interjected. In order to grant her wish, I will destroy this city with my own hands. Can't you hear her? She's saying she wants to see the sky. She yearns for it. Since she longs for it, I will gladly sacrifice myself for the cause. That bothersome city should be destroyed, and she should rule the surface in place of the foolish humans and the useless gods. Only I, who was chosen by her, can realize her. Stab. HRK. Before the hybrid could continue on, a rose-tipped knife suddenly found itself stabbed right into the man's throat, surprising everyone at how it just suddenly appeared. Upon recognizing the knife, Asfi turned towards Chester, whose arm was stretched out, showing that he was the one who had interrupted Alvia's vis knife to the throat. Soon enough, everyone looked at Chester in surprise, who looked back around at all of them. What? Chester asked, confused by their stares. He was just standing there prattling on. Did none of you think to take the shot? As if any of us could have done anything, Lilyun exclaimed, Even if they had wanted to do something, Olivas had previously shown that he was evenly matched with Bet, who was a LV5 adventurer and one of the most famous in Orario. HRK. You! Pulling the knife out from his throat, Olivas glared over at Chester as his wound began healing. Oh? So even a knife to the throat isn't enough to kill you? Chester said, slightly impressed. As I said before, Olivas' voice started out quiet before it started to return to normal the more his throat healed. This body of mine that is loved by her could never. Yes, I get it. Praise be to whoever this her person is. Chester interjected, speaking mockingly towards Olivas, which just further angered him. But don't think I don't know what you're trying to do. Your brain's still rattled from my kick earlier. Isn't it? You're simply speaking in order to buy yourself time to heal. KH. Olivas gritted his teeth, having been found out. Chester's words spoke true as from the hybrid's point of view. His vision was still slightly blurry as his body shook so very slightly that from afar one wouldn't even be able to tell he was still recovering. And yet, to the confusion of everyone, Olivas smiled. I'm surprised you saw through it. It's just as you said. I still can't move that well yet, just me, that is. Everyone's eyes widened in realization, but it was already too late as the hybrid raised his arm towards the parasite that was coiled around the pantry. Do it, Viscom. With those 3 words, one of the 3 monsters that had been coiled around the pantry began to move, and for the first time, everyone saw just how humongous it was compared to the Vilas. Compared to it, they all may as well have been ants. Well now, ain't she a big girl? Chester said causally, being the only one who wasn't intimidated by the Viscom's size. Why, you gotta be fucking kidding. Lilyun cursed loudly as she and everyone stared in disbelief at the Viscom's size. In fact, much to their horror, it was getting bigger the more it neared them. Scatter! Bet's cry snapped everyone out of their shock as they all quickly leaped out of the way, and just in time as the Viscom slammed its body down on the ground, causing a small quake as everyone was thrown back by the shockwave it produced. Once the shaking stopped and everyone got their bearings back together, they all looked up to find the Viscom staring them all down, with Olivas up on a small cliff standing right under it looking quite smug. Kill them! At his command, the giant monster began moving towards the group, its movement serpent-like. Not so fast! Bet cried out as he took out a magic sword in the form of a flaming dagger. However, the curious thing was that the flames from the magic-imbued weapon were being absorbed into his mithril boots. Said boots, named Flossvert, were specially created to have the ability to absorb magic, thus increasing its wielder's own power. Kicking his literal flaming legs out, Bet struck the body of the Viscom, but to his surprise, his attack, while indeed leaving a mark and was able to successfully divert its path away from Asfi and the others, seemed to have no effect, as the giant monster didn't even seem to register it as it kept moving just fine. No effect? Must be because of how big it is, Bet thought, clicking his tongue in annoyance. Fuhahaha. Go, Viscom. Punish these foolish adventurers for stepping into this sacred place, Olivas shouted, laughing gleefully at how much trouble the monster was causing the others. Olivas act. Hearing his name, the hybrid turned around to see Filvis standing a few feet behind him, aiming her staff and glaring at the man with eyes full of hate. How dare you still live after all you've done? Because of you, my companions. Oh, are you perhaps a survivor of the 27th floor nightmare? Olivas said before smiling. Now, it's true that I was the one who planned that incident, but I was as much of a victim as you were. By dying once, I was able to free myself from the hands of the gods. We've both been through painful experiences. Don't fool around. You. Now before you go ahead and direct all that anger at me, shouldn't you be more concerned about your fellow elf? Olivas said as he stepped to the side to show that in the distance Lafia was currently under assault by vines from a pack of Vilas. Filvis gasped as she now found herself in a conundrum. Just a few feet away from her was the man responsible for making her the living hell that it was today. The chance to avenge her fallen comrades was right in front of her. But on the other hand, a few yards away, her comrade was in danger. Lafia, the elf who said she wasn't dirty or cursed, was in danger if not aided right away. Coo! With gritted teeth, Filvis came to a decision. She charged straight towards Olivas and ran past him, running off to aid her fellow elf. Humph! Olivas scoffed under his breath as he smiled knowingly towards the running elf. Well, doesn't that just make your heart warm up? A voice spoke up, making Alvias turn around to see Chester standing right next to him. The hybrid jumped back in surprise, knowing by now that the masked person was no ordinary man, and yet he continued to watch as Filvis assisted Lafia with fending off the Vilas. A girl helping another girl in a life-threatening crisis. I bet some god up above is writing something like right now, except it's pure smut. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Those things make a surprising amount of money. The real surprise is when a woman is found buying such things. Should you really be here talking instead of aiding your comrades? Olivas said while staring warily at Chester, who chuckled in response. Comrades, please, I could care less about what happens to them all. Well, except maybe Loki's kids. She'd probably have my head if she found out I let them die here. So you're just another servant to the gods. Servant? Oh no no no, I am nothing like that. Then what are you? Some sort of an adventurer. Former adventurer, really? Though, I am trying to get back into the business, Chester said before he finally turned towards Olivas. But enough about me. Let's talk about you, Mr. Vendetta. And what makes you think I'll tell you anything? Olivas said as he took a fighting stance while letting out a wave of killing intent. Please, why not do us both a favor and drop the tough guy act? Chester said, not in the least bit fazed by Olivas's attempt to intimidate him. We both know that I could have killed you a long time ago, when I kicked you to the ceiling, and when I kicked you in order to save those kids. Both times I could have easily blown your head off, and you know that, don't you? Olivas made no response, but the sweat that was starting to form on the hybrid's body told Chester all he needed to know. Now you must be asking yourself, why is it that I'm holding back against you? Well, the first reason is that you're not worth the effort. A quarter of my strength is all I need to take you down. KH. Olivas gritted his teeth, but did not fall for Chester's provocation, knowing that route would lead to a second death for him. As for the other reason, I'm waiting for someone, and so I'm simply using you to pass the time, Chester said as he smiled and chuckled under his mask. And I must say that you've been very entertaining. Have you ever thought about becoming a preacher? You have a way with words. Are you mocking me? Olivas growled, half tempted to send the Viscum at Chester. He didn't know exactly how strong he was, but there was no way he could take on a monster of the Viscum size alone. Was that not obvious? Chester said, his tone obviously showing that he was mocking the hybrid right now. Olivas himself felt something snap inside of him at Chester's tone. Fuck it. He dies first, Olivas thought before raising his hand up. Viscu. Boom. Suddenly, just as Olivas was about to command the Psychum to attack Chester, a wall to the far left of Olivas exploded as crashing through it. To Olivas's surprise was Revis, her body showing signs of injuries and burns while the sword in her hand was completely destroyed, leaving her with just the handle. What? Olivas exclaimed in surprise, confused as to why his ally was here and why she was in such a state. Oh, Chester, as well as everyone else, turned their head towards the newly made hole in the wall as a figure emerged from it which everyone instantly recognized. Miss Ace, Lafia exclaimed in happiness as stepping out of the hole was indeed Ace. Slightly exhausted but no worse for wear. Huh? Lafia? And Bet. Ace, recognizing her fellow familia members, blinked at them in both surprise and confusion. Oh ho! Chester let a noise of slight surprise. But his surprise was not directed towards Ace. No, it was directed towards the hole she came out from. Under his mask, Chester smirked as he heard the faint sound of clacking metal. Well now, it's about time you got here. Clack clack clack. Barely audible at first, the sound of clacking metal grew louder and soon everyone heard it as a few seconds later another figure emerged from the hole Ace came from. A figure only Chester and those from Bet's group recognized. From under his helmet, Bell blinked in confusion at all the people in the area as he stood beside Ace, sword and shield in hand. Wah! Tin Head? Bet exclaimed in surprise, wondering what the hell was the knight wannabe doing here. Looking around at all the people here, Bell then turned to Ace and asked her, Your comrades? Most of them, Ace said before pointing over to Olivas and Chester. Those two, on the other hand, following her finger, Bell's eyes passed by Olivas and settled on Chester, who waved back at him. As if it were a reaction to it, a red glow emerged from under the slit of Bell's helmet as he trained his eyes down towards the masked man. Chester, sensing Bell's rising anger, simply chuckled in response. Meanwhile, Olivas looked over towards Revis, who was picking herself up, and scoffed at her. Are you just talk, Revis? How pitiful, Olivas said before looking over towards Ace and Bell, focusing mainly on the former. I wouldn't consider this little girl Arya, however if she desires it. Lifting his hand up, Olivas took command of the Viscum. Viscum! Stop! Revis shouted, trying to warn the hybrid, but it was already too late. I doubt it'd be a problem if we bring back a dead body. Die! Sword Princess! Miss Ace! Lafia cried out in worry as the giant monster obeyed its orders and charged towards Ace's location. Seeing the monster heading towards her, Ace lifted up her sword, ready to unleash her magic which she had been restricting up until now. However, grab throw. Faster than Ace could blink, she suddenly found herself flung away from where she was. Looking back, she saw Bell with his left arm stretched out, showing that he had grabbed and flung her away, leaving him the one to face the incoming giant monster. Bell! Ace found herself crying out the armored adventurer's name in worry as the Viscum practically crashed headfirst into the wall, seemingly crushing Bell in the process. Flipping herself around and landing on her feet, she looked back up in horror. He saved me? Why? In Ace's mind, she could not comprehend why the knight had flung her away when she was fully capable of dealing with the giant monster solo. Yet, as her mind played back the event, she saw that Bell had grabbed and thrown her away to safety on instinct. His first reaction to the giant monster charging at them was, to her disbelief, to push her out of harm's way. When exactly was the last time anyone has ever done that to her? Humph. I don't know who that man in the armor was, but it matters not, Olivas said, wiping away Bell's existence as a second thought. Now Viscum, the sword princess. Hearing that did Ace get back up and raise her sword to unleash her magic. Yet, just as she summoned forth a small gale, she, as well as everyone else, noticed something, unknowingly sharing the same thought. Did it just get warmer in here? Suddenly, from where the Viscum crashed into, a massive pillar of flame erupted which completely enveloped the Viscum's entire head. A wave of hot air washed over the entire area, making everyone break out sweating as the temperature increased to uncomfortable levels. Despite that, everyone kept their eyes on the pillar of fire as the body of the Viscum fell to the ground, dead with his head completely burned off. A few seconds later, the pillar of flame soon dissipated as the only thing that remained was a burnt ground and smoke. And from that smoke walked out Bell completely fine. The magic stone is in its head, Bell said as he turned to Asfi and the others, who all stared at him in shock. Thought I should let you know that. Wah wah wah. Eyes wide with disbelief, Olivas was speechless as he fell back on his butt. What hell? Lilyun's words pretty much summarized everyone's thoughts, as they all continued to stare at Bell in disbelief. The ones who were the most affected were the mages as they stared at Bell with eyes filled with fear. Such a powerful spell, just the heat alone is making me sweat like a pig, Lafia thought as her whole body shook. Such power, how did he summon forth such a spell in only a few seconds, and without chanting? Who is this person? Asfi thought to herself, staring warily at Bell. Amazing in contrast to everyone else. Ace looked at Bell not with eyes filled with fear, but with awe. Could he be stronger than me? Clap clap clap. The sound of clapping broke everyone from their stupor as the sounds of laughter made everyone turn to see Chester clapping and laughing down at them. Bravo! Bravo! It seems you're still as strong as ever, Bell Cranel. Bell Cranel? Asfi thought in surprise and disbelief, turning to the knight that Chester had called Bell. Bella's in the one Lord Hermes has been interested in? Chester, Bell growled as he glared over at the masked man. It's been quite some time since our last meeting. What brings you all the way down here? Chester asked despite already knowing the answer. Lifting up his sword, Bell pointed it over at Chester and said, I'm here for my stuff.